All right, going to go ahead and get started. Mystery religions, mystery cults, whatever you wish to call them, always raise an eyebrow or two when brought up within both public and academic contexts, inclusive even of the mysteries of ancient Greece and Rome. Trace back to as early as the 7th century BCE, but becoming very popular following the conquests of Alexander the Great. Mystery cults in antiquity were beliefs involving initiations, vows, secret rites, esoteric knowledge, magic words, votive offerings. Mystery cults emphasize the importance of personal choice in what one wished to believe rather than what was expected by society. But the mysteries were only powerful as your beliefs in them. And so faith became a key component to make these beliefs effective, making a person able to successfully meet challenges of everyday life. And yes, ultimately, mystery cults focused upon the ultimate salvation of the soul. Now, let's go down a little bit further into the labyrinth, so to speak. In general, mystery cults did not compete with already established religious beliefs, but were understood as adding personal depth and clarity to religious traditions and myths for individuals choosing to participate in them. Furthermore, mystery cults blend conceptions of orthopraxy, which is the practice of correct action, with orthodoxy, the profession of correct belief. Typically, three types of mystery cults are identified. First, those having very pronounced initiatory rites, proceeding through levels of mystic revelation in connection with a divinity. Second, those involving heightened mystical forms of expression, communication, and ecstatic outpourings directly related to the divinity. And third, those focusing upon special knowledge or gnosis or pragmatic systems believed to unite the individual with the divinity. Often, these three types, of course, blur into one another, dependent upon the particular techniques and strategies. And sometimes they include all three aspects. Many mystery cults use also what's called status dramatization for the individual, but orchestrated also group participation, sometimes even on a grand scale, showcasing a vast array of sacred symbols and objects, and colorful costumes, and dramatic recreations of some of the myths, as well as the various legends. So you kind of get the idea. When you hear the word mystery cult, a lot of people immediately go into occult, mystery occult. It's like, well, yeah, maybe. The point of the matter is, yeah, a cult, that which is being shrouded in a sense. But a cult, I like to think of it like this is, pardon me, I'm being a little bizarre here, like a cul-de-sac. You see, what happens is you got the main road of a religious system. Just picture a main road. And then what happens is that you have little offshoots from that main road that focus upon a particular Selvig individual or an idea, and it becomes really important in and of itself. In a sense, it is like the cul-de-sac. It surrounds a certain idea, and it grows and it grows and it grows. So it's an offshoot. So mystery cults are an offshoot of the mainline Greco-Roman religions, but they grow in a sense a life of their own. Now, what will happen is if this this offshoot gets bigger and bigger and bigger, eventually it will become a religion of its own. Does that make sense? It becomes its own religion. And so that's kind of how it operates. So let's take a look at the various characteristics or aspects of mystery cults. And I have 8 of them. So I'm going to go through those and then we're going to go dive into quite a few. We're going to be actually talking about the mystery cult at Eleusis. We'll be talking about the mystery cults related to Dionysus, including the Orphic Mysteries. We will talk about the Phrygian Magna Mater, Mithras, Isis, and Artemis of the Ephesians. I got a little treat at the very end. So that should be the main idea, right? Um, so, so to take a look at the 8 aspects in general, as I said, mystery cults originate as early as the 6th century BCE. Most date following the time of Alexander the Great in the Hellenistic era. And they were, of course, connected to initiations. So, number one, these are belief systems connected with an initiation. Number two, mystery cults always wear what I like to term the veneer of the exotic, of the foreign in their appearance. They seem very strange and particular and peculiar, I should say. They appear to maybe originate from ancient Egypt or Anatolia or even Persia. But in essence, they are more foreign in spirit than in actuality. Or in basic construction, they are still often very Greek, resembling more Eleusis and the cult of Dionysus than authentic belief systems from the ancient East. Third, number 3, mystery cults are spiritual in nature, acknowledging the existence of an individual and unique soul that is journeying someplace, and that via the mysteries one can focus on the nature of the soul. In fact, can even change it, improve upon it. Higher ethics is in connection with these souls. These ideas are often involved. So there's something that's ethical that connects to the elevation or change or transformation of the soul. Number 4, without doubt, mystery cults are religions of salvation, focusing upon a positive fate for the soul, for the person, both in this immediate life and the next. In many ways, this goal of personal salvation has certain parallels to Christianity. In fact, because of this fact, this is important, many Romans believed that Christianity was just another mystery cult. We know that for a fact. They wrote about it. They thought it was just one of the mysteries. And in fact, even Christian writers themselves acknowledge the fact that many believe that they practiced a mystery cult. I'll give you a name. His name is Justin Martyr, who lived during the 2nd century. Admitted there were many similarities between mystery cults and Christianities. And of course, Justin Martyr is a very famous Christian saint of the Catholic Church. Just the reality there. Yet a few asserted that it was the devil who was creating a counterfeit belief systems to deceive potential followers to follow these cults rather than their own. Of course, on the other side, many Gnostic forms of Christianity were even closer to many of the mystery cults in form and function, especially regarding their initiations. So they could, in a sense, be a classic form of a mystery cult. Okay, number 5. I think that's where we're at, right? Oh, before we go to number 5, I want to mention that this is not included in my notes. When it comes to salvation ideas, I just want to bring up that Most of these mystery cults in connection to salvation have some sort of salvic figure, some figure that you're going to put your faith in that's going to rescue you, that's going to save you, that's going to bring you to a better place. So in the Eleusinian mysteries, it's going to be Persephone and Demeter, right? Obviously, the Dionysian mysteries, it's going to be Dionysus and, in many cases, also Persephone. We'll go there a little bit. Um, when it comes to the cult of Isis, obviously Isis. When it comes to Mithraism, obviously Mithras. So you're gonna, these are salvation figures. They're gonna if we believe in them, they're gonna save us. So that's an interesting addition. Number 5, mystery cults applied the idea mystery. They will use the actual word in Greek, mysterion, right? In connection to an experience involving each and every member of the belief system, as well as everyone as a group. Okay, so they some kind of mystery is going on. Yet we must be careful to make uh, the immediate association that a mystery was inherently a secret. While to be sure, there were secret rites involved in the mysteries, divulged only to those who were initiated. The idea of mystery relates to the manner of one's personal transformation. The mystery of a metamorphosis that transcended the ability to decipher rationally what exactly was happening to them. It's the mystical experience that makes it into a mystery. As one entered the mysteries, there was a personal change that occurred beyond definition, where the mind ceased to act in a rational manner. Via these mysteries, the individually involved in these magic became a new person and achieved a new status as well. This change was more like status dramatization through initiation. The mysteries are both a celebration and initiation all at once, initiation into being something new, right? Number 6, mystery cults are a form of personal religion. In the ancient world, often whatever religion of the city or region or kingdom or empire you were born in, it ended up as the religion you professed the rest of your life. It's just basically how things were. For the others not of this group, your beliefs were determined either by your family or your ethnic group. As far as your individual thoughts were concerned, it was a non issue. Yet, mystery cults changed all that, especially after the conquest of Alexander the Great. You see, before, many of the Greeks were tied to their individual city states, their polis, whether it be Athens or Sparta or Corinth or some other place. But with the expansion of the Greeks eastward, this traditional route was destabilized as the Greeks encountered new places and new cultures and settled down far from their home. What's going to happen now? The collective needs and expectations of their former city states no longer mattered. As for allegiance to the specific religions tied to their local gods and goddesses, this began to break down with the widening of a new world. As a result, the individual's own beliefs began to matter more. That their beliefs could be decided on their own choice. Mystery cults were adopted as a result of personal choice. It was a private decision, seeking one's very own relationship with the divine. I mean, let's say you're a soldier that is fighting with Alexander the Great, and you settle outside of Greece, and you take as your wife somebody who is of a belief system that is other than your own, right? You're going to have a child. What does that what will that child's belief system be, right? Who's going to win the day, right? And so the emphasis starts to become, maybe it's not by birth religion, maybe it's by choice, it's by preference. This is a big moment in world history and something that is often forgotten when it comes to the background of the history of Christianity, that so much of the ideas within Christianity were already being an exercise, so to speak, within these mystery cults. I mean, think about it. In Judaism, you chose you choose to be Jewish, you're born Jewish, right? You know, but Christianity, much of that was about a choice, a selection. You're following something that you want to believe. Well, the mystery cults did this way earlier. And became popularized after Alexander the Great, which of course is 300 years before Christianity. Let's move right along, right? Seventh, mystery cults were very much votive religions. Of course, votive offerings are everywhere to be found throughout the Mediterranean, many of them related to securing immediate difficulties in the here and now. These come in the form of votive lamps. Now, a typical lamp, as you can see here, sometimes it's kind of plain. This is for, obviously, for small, for a little bit of light. Some of these were more ornamented, right? But if you want to see a real cool votive oil lamp, here's one right here. This is a votive lamp. And you can see right here, this is from Magnesia on the Meander. And you see right here, this is an image of Dionysus. See here, and you can see where the, of course, obviously, where to pour the oil in, and this where the wick was is kind of broken there. This lamp is around 2,000 years old. Kind of cool, right? So votive lamps. These were left at shrines or before the image of specific gods. Often these lamps were offered for protection of some kind, perhaps during the course of a long journey, especially by sea, right? Other times, votive offerings were left to secure fertility, whether for crops or for an offspring. Still others asked to be healed from a disease that has afflicted them. Yet these acts all have something in common. They are acts intended for some form of salvation, whether in this life or the next. Makes sense? So votive offerings are often accompanied by practicing making vows. Making vows, of course, is a basic human strategy for coping with the future. This kind of makes time manageable by contract. So we rise to impress a kind of structure like if and then upon the uncertainties of the future. For example, if salvation for the present anxiety and distress occurs, if the success or profit hoped for is attained, if then a special and circumscribed renunciation will be made, a finite loss in the interest of a larger gain. Got it? So Diagoras, the atheist, was a skeptic for this act. He said that Samothrace, regarding all the votive offerings of seafaring peoples saved by the great gods, he says, those would have been much more numerous if all who had drowned at sea had an opportunity to make offerings as well. Unquote. So votive religion, in a sense, socializes anxieties and sufferings. The individuals are encouraged to try once more. Individual encounters these ideas that are reinforced, for example, by priests and fellow worshipers. The vow was made public. Many others profit from the investments, including craftsmen and shopkeepers. So basically, it's like, hey, I'm going to go on a journey. Okay, I want to be, let's say I'm going off, I'm leaving Corinth for Ephesus. Well, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to make an offering, perhaps to Poseidon, before I leave Corinth. And I'm going to go ahead and offer a lamp. It's a votive. It's an offering that, I make a vow. I'm giving this to you. And then, of course, when you securely get to Ephesus, when you arrive there, first thing you do, one of the first things you're supposed to do is after you get through, walk down the quay and and get through the main entrance there and past the money changers and go through, the throng of the public baths. Is the first thing you do a beeline for one of the temples and you make an offering of thanksgiving. So sometimes you get stuck doing two lamps. One offered in preparation for and one offered after that. But sometimes the vow obviously is included. And that means that you have to renounce something, renounce something. What are you going to do? So they think of something that they're going to renounce in fulfillment of their vow. And it could be many kinds of things, even when it comes to dietary restrictions or some kind of monetary action or gifts or whatever it may be, largeness or some core. Oftentimes, it is even just a decision to change one's practice or shave one's head. It's interesting because even in the book of Acts, when Paul fulfills a vow, he shaves his head on two different occasions. So it's even this idea was socialized within aspects of Hellenistic Judaism and so forth. So yes, votive religion, right? And you think to yourself, wait a minute, do we have those votive candles? We go to the grocery store and you take a look. Yeah, those are, and what do you do? If you're Catholic, what do you do with a votive candle? Yeah, you take it to the church, you light it up, and what do you do? You go, oh, got it. Yes, ancient religion, specifically the mystery belief systems involved these votive offerings. Okay, number 8, mystery cults required an act of faith. Of course, in Greek, the word is pistis, right? And so you believe, and you believe a personal faith, right? You have a personal faith in this God. You make a vow to this God, and you believe that it's going to give you salvation. Now, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Or is it just me? Yeah, it does. That's mystery cults. It is. Now, with that said, uh, unlike Christianity, if that God doesn't work for you, then you choose another one. So we see these, which is kind of funny. You see on various tombstones, you see those who are initiated in many different mystery cults. You got to just make sure all your bases are covered. So there's like a list. I'm initiated in this and this one and this one, this one. Yeah. So that could be pretty expensive after a while. I don't know. So one of the oldest recorded mystery cults, of course, is the Mysteries of Eleusis. So the Eleusinian mysteries are usually placed into the plural, and for good reason, since they incorporate more than one mystery initiation. Actually, they include a string of them dedicated ultimately to the Greek god known as Dionysus. Now, in classic mythology, the Greeks tend to emphasize the potency and power of the male Olympians, while female goddesses are often subordinated by stories that disassociate them from their mothers and place their emergence of the world, their immediate origins from male deities. I mean, this is the problem with traditional Greek religion. For example, Christine Downey notes Demeter, Hera, and Hestia were swallowed by their father immediately after birth. Aphrodite was born, at least according to Hesiod's account, out of the semen that surrounded her father's severed genitals after Cronos had thrown them into the surging sea. Athena, according to the same source, emerged full grown from Father Zeus's head. And of the major Olympian goddesses, only Artemis had a mother whom she seems to have mothered from almost the moment of her birth, unquote. But of course, Artemis was not indigenous to mainland Greece, arising originally from Asia Minor, with her name appearing throughout Lydia and Lycia at a very early date. Where Artemis reached the shores of Greece, she is not depicted in the classical tales as a great mother of fertility, but she becomes what? A virgin goddess, the epitome of infertility. The shift is really, really staggering, but not unexpected in the society dominated by the obsessive fear of women as a result of the Athenian influence as well as others. With that said, there is a certain irony, maybe justice, that the most revered site for goddess worship on Greek soil is at Eleusis. Let's look at the first image. Eleusis, which just is basically only 14 miles away from Athens. Not only did the cult of Demeter survive attempts by Athens to dominate it, but the mysteries became a central aspect of Athenian religion, and then in turn, a vital part of the pan-Hellenic tradition. Eventually, the Eleusinian mysteries were well respected throughout the Roman Empire. They were indeed, with prominent Latin philosophers and emperors numbering amongst its initiates. Okay, so what happens, for example, Pausanias and other ancient authors enumerate many mother goddess cults around both Greece and Asia Minor, with features that parallel the cult of Demeter at Eleusis, including an emphasis on fertility and some attached mysteries. Yet, despite this familiarity with goddess worship in Greek popular religion, often in opposition to the myths through Athenian influence, societal acceptance of the cult of Magna Mater from Asia Minor and all its Oriental features was not immediate and proceeded through various stages with many compromises and innovations along the way. These adjustments were even more pronounced in the later Roman era. In contrast, the cult of Demeter at Eleusis neither suffered prejudicial treatment by the political establishment nor society at large. Now let's go to this next image.
With origins going back to the Mycenaean period, if not earlier, the local cult was always well esteemed as strictly a Greek phenomenon. During the Middle Hellenic period, which is 18th and 17th centuries, a small village consisting of crude stone houses covered the entire slope of the hill at Eleusis, but there's no evidence of the cult from this time. By the early Mycenaean period, 1580 to 1500, the place later occupied by the mystery sanctuary was left empty and apparently was reserved as an outdoor sacred space. The first structure, a single room, its roof supported by two inner columns and opening out upon a projecting platform with steps to one side, appears at the site in the 15th century, so this is really early on. By the late Hellenic period, 1400 to 1100, this edifice was extended by three rooms situated between the gate leading to the courtyard and the main building, with access to the courtyard only made via these three rooms, and restrictions indicating that there was, in some ways, as we see through the layout, some way of initiation. Although the cult of the Eleusinian Demeter was viewed as an autochthonic element of Greek culture, there are some indications that the cult may have originated from Crete. This evidence we can find in different places. Let's go to the next image. There we go. So this is an idealized form of the later mysteries, right, at Eleusis. Let's go to the next image. There we go. This evidence is found within the Homeric hymn to Demeter itself, where the goddess, as an old woman, tells the daughters of Helios that she came across the sea from Crete, forced by pirate men who abducted her against her will. According to Everett Ferguson, the rites had originally been properly of one family at Eleusis and then became open to the town's citizens. When Eleusis was absorbed by Athens, the lesser mysteries were added to the greater, and initiation was open to the people of Attica. With the increase of Athens' influence in the late 6th and 5th centuries, the mysteries are open to all who spoke Greek. They became truly universal after the conquest of Alexander, being expressly made available to the citizens of the Roman Republic as well as the empire. What you're seeing here, however, is that it's not only Demeter that's connected to the cult of Eleusis, but also Persephone. So many scholars have traced that this was not only a site dedicated to Demeter, but also to Persephone. And this, of course, goes back to beliefs of going back to the Minoans as well as the Mycenaeans. We see here an image here that many believe is Persephone with two companions in a cup from the Middle Minoan period. And you can see that she seems to be coming out of the earth. Now she is rising forth. Okay.
But the Eleusinian rites went from just simply that of the family or the regions and became universal. So therefore, the Eleusinian mysteries While local, in a sense that one had to come to Eleusis in order to receive initiation, these mysteries became one of the first universal belief systems open to all, regardless of race or place of origin. Now, the effect of this appeal to universalism within the Universalist mystery cult, especially arriving to prominence around the first century CE, reaches culmination in Christianity, right? Where there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for all are one in Christ, Galatians 3:28. Well, this idea was already part of the Eleusinian mysteries. Much like Christianity later on, women, slaves, and foreigners were admitted into the Eleusinian mysteries. Now, in contrast to other mysteries and festivals at which men and women had different roles or which were limited to just one gender. Let's go to the next image. In the Eleusinian mysteries, both sexes mixed freely in each other's company without fear of discrimination and fell subject only to one rule, that the candidate for initiation should be pure and not of unintelligible speech. And we see that here. So there it is. So it is inclusive of both male as well as female. Okay, so take that image down. So the basic story right here, the basic story here goes as follows. The myth, so to speak, right? It's the myth of Demeter and Persephone, or Kore, and it proceeds as follows. You basically have the god Hades taking Persephone, also known as Kore, who is the maiden, and takes her down into the underworld. Now, what will become popular later on is that there's this agreement between Zeus and Hades, and unbeknownst to Demeter, to take Persephone away, and they describe this as a rape. But the earlier sources, we realize, do not necessarily have that story, but in some way, she gets down into the underworld. Now, Demeter searches the world looking for her daughter. And while she searches, Demeter begins to neglect her duties and lets the earth, as a result, which she's supposed to be watching after, go barren. The gods become worried, and Zeus, who had witnessed the abduction or perceived abduction, then decided to intervene. But before she went back to the world of the living, Persephone receives, in some versions of the story, a pomegranate to eat. And as a result of having this pomegranate, she, as a result of this, she was always connected to the realm of the underworld as well as the overworld, and had to stay there 1/3 of the year or half the year, depending on the version of the story. This symbolic death, that's important, the symbolic death and rebirth is the time that the seed lies in the earth and then comes back to life, reborn, as it was with Persephone. So we're looking at this ancient vegetative magic. Now, Carl Crennier believes in what's called the Epoptea at Eleusis, that both men and women alike appeared in the role of the goddess, searching for her daughter, for a part of herself in her daughter. So this is what gets interesting, is that this role of Demeter, who is searching for her daughter, is still shared with women as well as men. He says further, with assertion that the separation of mother and daughter, the yearning of Demeter for her own girl child, the Kore, must be characteristic of the undivided human existence of men as well as women, but in one way of men and another way of women. Therefore, the assumption that the Eleusinian Epoptea was originally in a matriarchal period exclusively a woman's mystery and that men had begun to participate in mere imitation of the women is not true, because men's initiation of the questing goddess led to the same telos, the same uh, goal, the same fulfillment as the woman's imitatio dea, or the same visio beatifica, right? For men and women alike, this was a true visit, a true visitation, for which the Greek word theorea and the relation of men and women to person, visit and beheld, was indeed the same. Now, we again, what we're doing is we are forgetting, and I think that's very interesting. We are forgetting that in ancient religion, that men and women, women and men participated together in these belief systems that are connected to a goddess, that are connected to the living embodiment of the divine feminine. And I think that's what we've done now is we look back in time through our patriarchal eyes and we go, oh, well, because it's a goddess, therefore it must be originally women who are the only ones worshiping, and the men are worshiping the male one. That is not true. And it's not true at the early stratum of Greek society. Am I being clear here? And so this goes back to an earlier time. And I think it's interesting. I'll just say this as an aside that even within certain religious circles, even alternative religious circles and so forth, though oftentimes, so what's a goddess, so it must is only meant for women. This experience was meant for both genders. And this is part, if you don't understand this, you're not going to understand ancient mystery cults at all, because this is the same idea that connects with the cult of Isis. It wasn't just for women, it was men and women together who are being initiated through this, as well as Artemis of the Ephesians. Are you guys getting this? So anyway, I'm kind of rolling back some of the revisionism that we see in modern day, even amongst scholars, we see this. And it's disheartening to see how far patriarchy has won the day to the point where you see this disenfranchisement of one gender, and it has to be just women in this case. It's both. And the sense of the Eleusinian mystery, it's all about equality. It's all about it's not about male or female. It's all about being one together. Okay. Now, this does not mean, having said all that the road to initiation was necessarily easy. Those desirous of partaking of the Eleusinian mysteries had to pay a steep sum for the privilege of initiation. They had to pay, for example, the price of the sacrificial animals, not to mention the cost for the journey to Greece, right? For some, especially at the furthest fringes of the Roman Empire, an incredible financial burden was freely accepted in exchange for this expected salvation. For instance, one inscription sets the fee for a slave at 15 drachmae, a considerable amount that would automatically eliminate many individuals in forced servitude, even though it's supposed to be inclusive of slaves. Beyond the most obvious problem of costs, the Eleusinian mysteries included three degrees of initiation. First of all, you had the lesser mysteries, and then you had the greater mysteries, and finally you had the epopteia, which is a year later. So you got three. This meant that if the initiate really desired to reach the highest level of the mysteries, he had either had to stay in Athens for a year, or he had to undergo yet another pilgrimage to Greece a year later. Once more, it is important to emphasize that the Eleusinian rites promised more for the leisurely classes and the traveling merchant than for, of course, those who are of the impoverished members of society. Still, thousands traveled to Athens and then to Eleusis every year. And after 215 BCE, the lesser mysteries were celebrated twice a year. These celebrations were mainly concerned with purification, especially through various fasts and sacrifices, which of course is more money. But the lesser mysteries were also pleasant and exciting, where initiates sang various hymns to Demeter and felt cleansed through the waters of Eleusis. Whether one was sprinkled or immersed is open to debate, although a relief discovered in the riverbed of Eleusis may offer a clue. It represents Hercules, accompanied by Hermes, both bearing the characteristic pictures coming to be initiated. So it looks like a donkey to me. Now, let's go to the next image. The public the public character of the greater mysteries is beyond debate and constituted a popular festival in Athens, as well as at Eleusis. On the 14th of Boedromion, or September, the holy objects, Hiera, were brought to the city in round baskets called kistai. These objects were deposited in the Lusian. Let's take a look at the next image. This is where these images were deposited, the ruins of that. I want to show you what a kiste is. So we'll close this image, and I have a picture here on my phone here, and I will show you. So this is it's a kiste. There's the basket. See there? And this is connected to the Lusian mysteries. You can see there's a snake coming out of it. So that's a kiste. Good, thank you. Of course, it was deposited at this particular place, the sacred place at the foot of the Acropolis of Athens. The most important part of the Athenian celebration was on the 16th of, well, I guess we can call the 16th of September, when following the cry, "To the sea, O Mistai," each mistis took a bath in the sea together with his piglet, as Plutarch says in his Phocion 28:6. So the pig was the principal sacrificial animal used for purification in the worship of Demeter. And since its blood was considered capable of purifying whatever was impure in humans, it is likely they were sacrificed immediately after the bath in the sea. So what basically happens is these initiations, you are baptized. You are baptized. And all your impurities in this baptism by water went from you into the pig and was, in a sense, released, right? According to Walter Burkert, myth associated the death of the pig with Persephone sinking into the earth, just as the Thesmophoria festival. Undeniably, the sacrifice was a very public event, he continues, with the initiates entering the water, holding their pigs before all those gathered Athenians. And in many ways, it was not unlike a Christian baptism, he says, where the entire community was meant to observe these outer acts as representing an internal transformation, unquote. Wow. So here we go. Now, the greater procession. Let's go to the next image, because we do have an image of the greater procession. So take a look at this. You'll like these images. The greater procession to Eleusis occurred on the 19th with the crowd of initiates shouting, "Yake, oh, Yake," and they dance along the route in ecstasy. Let's go to the next image. This word, ayakos, was often identified with Dionysus, who was in some traditions considered the son of either Demeter or Persephone or Kore. The procession started at the Kerameikos, which was the ancient cemetery in Athens, perhaps symbolizing the idea the search for Kore did indeed start in the realm of death. So let's go to the next image. There we go. We get another image of the torches here. In fact, I do have an image of Iacchus. Let's go to the next image so you can see. There we go. There's Iacchus. Yeah, great. Thank you for showing that. All right. So you have this procession that is going on, right? Now, Burkert notes that when the procession reached the boundary between Athens and Lusus, where there were some streams, there was a piece of what's understood as grotesque buffoonery that was enacted at one of the bridges. Masked figures made fun of the passing Mistai with mockery and obscene gestures. After enjoying this frivolity and crossing the first bridge, they drank the Kikion. This was a special drink favored by peasants. It was sometimes mixed it was basically water, barley, and other natural flavors and seasonings. There was some cases there were grated cheese in it. Now, the barley contained ergot, which is a fungus that grows on barley and rye and causes, how do I say this, irrational behavior, even a hallucination. So some things are happening on the way to Eleusis. The road to Eleusis is starting to spin around, right? Okay. Next, they crossed over a second but smaller bridge where they had to walk single file, making it almost impossible for carts to cross. After walking off the bridge, the candidates were met by a priest who asked them to give a special password. Many believe that it was here that they pronounced for the first time, maybe out of two different times, the famous assertion, I have fasted, drunk the Kikion, taken things out of the big basket, and after performing a rite, put them in a little basket, whence I put them back in the big basket, unquote. Yeah, so there's something going on there, right? Once again, it must be emphasized that the nature of the procession was a very public event. The journey to Eleusis was quite long. They made these poor people walk 14 miles. I can't imagine anybody making anybody walk that far. And by the time the initiates reached the sacred precinct, they proceeded through the gates with torches ablaze, because now it was nighttime, symbolizing their illumination to come. Resting and observing a required fast during the day of the 20th of September, the initiates prepared themselves for the greater mysteries to be held that night in the Telesterion. Let's go and take a look at the next image. There is the area. There's Eleusis, a nice, you see the Acropolis there. You see the image of the sanctuary. Let's go to the next. I like this next image. You can see a little better what it looked like, the Telesterion. You can see right there. Let's go to the next image. And of course, obviously the mystic rites. You can see here, next image. This is a reconstruction of what the Telesterion looked like in general. This structure differed in its ground plan from a regular Greek temple because it had to accommodate a large crowd of initiates at its services. It measured 54 by 52 meters, with 22 columns supporting the roof and having tiers of 8 stone steps along the walls, probably designed for standing rather than sitting, much like restriction imposed upon catechism in Christianity. Non-initiates were forbidden entry into the Telesterion. Furthermore, Carl Carini notes that it has been possible to determine precisely the situation and orientation of the throne on which the Hierophant sat, or in front of which he stood when, like the bishop in Christian liturgy, he officiated at the ceremony. Let's take a look at the next image. The Hierophant's throne was positioned directly to the left of the entrance to the Anacterion. This sacred room covered a natural rock formation. It remained unaltered throughout the history of the shrine. Unlike many shrines devoted to chthonic deities or mysteries, there was no true entrance to the underworld or no chasm per se. But let's go to the next image. and yet the place was still very dark and mysterious, as you can see, in and of itself. Let's take a look at how it will look like on the outside. So it was very much like a chasm. Instead, the Hierophant brought the mysteries out to the gathered crowds, revealing various holy things. The great fire under which the Hierophant officiated obviously burned on top and of the roof of the telesterion as a kind of skylight. The Eleusinian mysteries of initiation. Let's go to the next image because it looks kind of over here. So there's another picture of the telesterion. And let's look at one more. There is still an actual cave where some of the drama did occur, which we will talk about in a little bit. Okay, thank you for showing that. The Eleusinian rites of initiation, as included, things enacted, dromeno, things said, logomena, and things shown, dekemina. All three activities were sealed from non-initiates and common knowledge by, well, a very strict vow of silence. The most common theory concerning the dromena, or the things enacted, is that it consisted of a sacred pageant relating the story of Demeter's loss and rediscovery of her beloved daughter, Persephone, or Kore. I think it's interesting that a large portion of the mystery cults, if not all of them, included this kind of element. And you'll see that as we go through. There's some kind of dramatic representation, whether it be the cult of Mithras, whether it be the cult of Artemis of the Ephesian, whether it be the cult of Dionysus, whether it be Isis. There's just some kind of drama that is presented. So since the myth was presented to all the world and art, it is unlikely that the drama enacted the rape of Persephone or Demeter. But most likely it was presented at the nearby Plutonian, which we saw, a sanctuary in a cave near the initiation hall, which has a hole giving access to an underground staircase. It may have been some reenactment of the myth. I'm thinking that it may be a reenactment of the earlier myth of Persephone and Hades, as well as Demeter, which the general public did not know. And that's part of the mysteries. Just throwing that one in for fun, right? So we don't know all the activities. Other activities, these are left for speculation. Since while Christian authors such as Clement of Alexandria and Hippolytus of Rome and Arnobius suggest various rites, frequently they allude to sexual ones in nature that may have been taken during the Eleusinian mysteries. While these references could be accurate, they actually may be descriptions of later mysteries of Demeter and Kore, not at Eleusis, but actually at Alexandria. This is the theory that Marvin Meyer believes very strongly, that it's not the Eleusinian mysteries per se, but this is connected to Alexandria, and where these writers would have had access to this information and then read into the Eleusinian mysteries from there near Athens. As may be reconstructed of various sources, the great cry, Parakaya, which means rain, conceive, according to Hippolytus, may have been a collective invocation for the sky to emit rain and to the earth to become fruitful, perhaps accompanied by such a ritual as the pouring of water onto the ground, an act symbolizing the intercourse of the deities and the impregnation of Mother Nature. This is mentioned by Athenaeus in his Dipnosophists. Thus, in the context of the Eleusinian interests, the male partner, Father Zeus, and the female partner, Mother Demeter, or the maiden Kore, was involved in what is understood as a hieros gamos, or some sort of sacred marriage. One of these dramatic recreations of the myth is described by Clement of Alexandria. However, he does firmly attribute this to Eleusis, and he mentions a very strange figure by the name of Balbo. Let's go to the next image. This is a very curious story, and this will throw you off. So let's see our image of Balbo here. Balbo, he says, he's writing this in the 2nd century, having received Demeter as a guest, offers her a draught of wine and meal. She declines to take it, being unwilling to drink on account of her mourning. Balbo is deeply hurt, thinking she has been slighted, and thereupon uncovers her secret parts and exhibits them to the goddess. Demeter is pleased at the sight, and now at last receives the draught, delighted with the spectacle. These are the secret mysteries of the Athenians, unquote, from Clement of Alexandria in the 2nd century. The role played by Balbo resembles that of Iamba and the Homeric hymn to Demeter, and her character is frequently seen in connection to the Orphic story of Persephone's abduction. This fact was not unnoticed by Clement of Alexandria, who, after describing the exposure of Balbo at Eleusis, directly connects what transpired in the mysteries to the subject of Orpheus's poems. The poem Clement quotes from Orpheus concerning Balbo runs as follows. He says, "This said, she drew aside her robes and showed a sight of shame. Child Iacchus was there, and laughing, plunged his hand below her breasts. Then smiles the goddess. In her heart she smiled, and drank the draught from out of the glancing cup," unquote. Clement even asserts that Orpheus is, quote, the originator of the mysteries, unquote, but whether he specifically means the mysteries at Eleusis or the mysteries in general is uncertain. Balbo herself was a curious individual, with her name interpreted to mean belly, that which she showed to Demeter, being in a sense the female counterpart of the phallic emblem. So what is important to remember about Balbo, and what Clement of Alexandria does not mention, and probably intentionally in order to provide more force to his accusation of sexual improprieties, is that she was intended to be rather a pleasant and fun character whose stories served to relieve the mourning of the Mysti and to provide for a necessary mood change for those who are the celebrants, moving them from sadness to joy. The initiates laughed at the obscenity in a light atmosphere charged with excitement, and the episode may have served as an occasion for the drinking of the kykeon, which the women had brought along on their heads. All right, so there you have it. Let's go to the next image. Now we talk about the things shown. Of the things, and this is, of course, another image you can see of things being displayed and shown. Actually, I want to show just a few more of these images here. We also have a nice image, let's go to the next one, of Demeter and sorry, Persephone and Hades there, so that's good. And let's go to the next one too. Yeah, there, enthroned. Of the things now said, you see, obviously there is a gesture here, so things are being said. Okay, so now what is being said? Clement of Alexandria, what he's trying to do is he's trying to expose the mysteries by telling what's going on here. Although he doesn't fully understand them, it's most likely he's getting this right, but maybe his commentary is not so correct. You do have many who are converting to Christianity who were part of the Orphic mysteries that would be willing to divulge this information. So basically, this is the same, okay, that things are said. It says, I fasted. Remember this? I drank the draught I took from the chest. Having done my task, I placed in the basket, and from the basket into the chest. Remember this earlier. So this led, so something is going on. So the question is, it seems to be, ancient sources don't seem to agree. It seems to be it's part of the initiation further down before you're like the password to Eleusis, but seems to also be revealed or said again, perhaps because now we're seeing some of what is the mysteries themselves. Okay, This leads, of course, directly to the things shown. The content of this chest have been variously described. And so we're going to go through the possibilities. I guess we'll see my face for this. um, so what's in the chest? What's the mystery? Well, Tertullian believed that the entire secret token of their tongues, he says, is revealed to be an image of the male organ. So he believes that's the special image. Now, of course, basing his theory on an allusion of Theophrastus, referred to tools of working, of grinding corn, that early men consigned to secrecy and encouraged as something sacred. So it must be something that's phallic. Walter Burkert, very famed Greek historian, believes mortar and pestle were hidden in the basket, the instruments, in fact, for preparing the kykeon. Now, Hippolytus believed that an ear of grain was revealed to the initiates. They showed this grain. If Clement of Alexandria is still referring to Eleusinian mysteries later on in one of his references, the chest contained sesame cakes, a pyramid, and spherical cakes, and cakes with many navels, also balls of salt, and a serpent, which is the mystic sign of Dionysus Basarius. They also were said to contain pomegranates, fig branches, fennel stalks, ivy leaves, round cakes, poppies, a majorum, a lamp, a sword, a woman's comb, and other things that seem to be representative of the women's parts. So what are they? I actually have a theory. It's a funny theory. You could agree or disagree. I don't care. But what I believe is that you have all these people who were initiated, and they're now, many of them are converting or no longer believing, and they're giving away the secret. And it turns out that they're giving the secret's always different. You see where I'm going with this one. I think the smart thing is to just change up the secret every year. Right? Think about it. Every year. So that way it keeps everybody on their toes. Like, no, that's not it. It was, maybe I didn't see the real secret. It's a good way of doing it. Just change it up. It's like changing your password. You update your password. Here it comes. Okay, it's time to update. What are we use? I think we're going to use fennel today, this year. And we'll switch over to fig branches next time, pomegranates the year after. It'll be the year of the pomegranate. That would be a smart mystical thing to do, is to just keep changing it up. Okay. But the most awe-inspiring and transformative moment in the Eleusinian mysteries occurred when the initiates entered into the inner sanctum and beheld a great light, Megaphos. They were called to this epiphany by the Hierophant, sounding the horn, sounding the horn, as well as what is called the Echion. The Echion, it's a type of gong. It sounded, they used this in various Greek theatrical performances. In fact, Plutarch mentions this pinnacle occasion in the rites, comparing it with the initiation into philosophy. So he's comparing the Eleusinian mysteries to becoming initiated as a philosopher. He says, just as persons who are being initiated into the mysteries throng together at the outset amid tumult and shouting, and jostle against one another. But when the holy rites are being performed and disclosed, the people are immediately attentive in awe and silence. So too at the beginning of philosophy. About its portals also you will see great tumult and talking and boldness, as some boorishly and violently try to jostle their way towards the repute it bestows. But he who has succeeded in getting inside and has seen a great light, as though a shrine were open, adopts another bearing of silence and amazing, and humble and orderly attends upon, reasoned upon a God. So, of course, Plutarch was initiated in the Eleusinian mysteries. And he's referring to this epiphany of great light, not just for philosophy, but what happened, because others will read, right? Mention the fact there's a great light. What the initiates exactly saw is a mystery, but there are some clues connecting reports of Apollodorus and Hippolytus. Walter Burker concludes the Mystes sees Kore, Persephone, who is called up by the Hierophants by the stroke of a gong. As the underworld opens up, terror gives way to joy or reunion. Then the Hierophant announces a divine birth. The mistress has given birth to a sacred boy, Brimos, the Brimos. Finally, he displays the ear of corn in silence. Maybe. That the Mystes saw an image of Kore in some form is indeed the distinct possibility. A papyrus fragment, for example, from Milan depicts Heracles stating of the Eleusinian mysteries. He says, I was initiated long ago. Lock up Eleusis, Hierophant, and put the fire out. Doudicus, deny me the holy night. I have been already initiated into the more authentic mysteries. I have beheld the fire, whence I have seen the core, unquote. Carianis refers to another obscure passage from Sosipostris, which, if it has been properly corrected, a figure is depicted as rising from the ground. So it's a possibility. So as for the purpose of the great fire, we are not sure. Some will say that maybe this great fire connects to another story connected to Demeter, where Demeter placed a boy of the king into a fire in order to gradually burn away his mortal flesh, thus making him into an immortal being. And so maybe this represents an apotheosis of fire that's being indicated, and this great change, right? The following day, after various celebrations, including dancing, the new initiates partook in the sacrifice of piglets in a large bowl that was part of a grand feast. Now let's go to the next image so we can see something there. Yeah, there we go. There's the initiates there. It's towards the end there. Grand feast. After this, two large vessels called the plemachoi were filled to the brim with liquid, one facing east and the other west. At a certain given moment, these two vessels were poured out as a libation, and again the priest declared, rain, conceive. This occurred on the 23rd of September, the last day of the mysteries. Through various symbolic and mythological representations, the Eleusinian mysteries revealed to Greeks and barbarians alike that there is life from death, hope from the hopeless depths of Hades. The Homeric hymn to Demeter declares, happy is he amongst men who has seen these mysteries, but he who is uninitiated and who has no part of them has no claim ever on such blessings, even when departing down into the moldy darkness. Sophocles states in a fragment from his Triptopoetus, thrice blessed are those mortals who have seen these rites and thus enter Hades. For them alone there is life, for others all is misery. Perhaps understanding the mysteries of Eleusis will shed light on the passage from the Gospel of John, which has Jesus saying, truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains by itself alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Interesting, right? As apparent from the study, the Eleusinian mysteries were widely accepted throughout the Greco-Roman world. To receive initiation into the rites of Demeter was both a privilege and a mark of distinction. The universalistic appeal to the cult attracted commoners who could afford it, and emperors alike. Furthermore, commitment to a particular lifestyle was not required. One could be initiated, receive the promise of a happy afterlife, and live without any worry of ascetic restrictions. In a sense, the Eleusinian mysteries did indeed bring people together. But what of the mysteries of Dionysus now? We're moving to the next topic. So let's go take a look at an image of Dionysus. According to one version of the story, Dionysus was the son of Zeus and Semele. For the most part, scholars at least agree that Dionysus was usually depicted as a god of wine, fertility, and vegetation. Dionysus is intimately associated with the seasons, with the processes of life and death, and the return to life so woven within the natural realm. Hence, while in the spring and summer there is life, in the fall there is the loss of life, with death following in the winter. Yet, with that said, as spring approaches, life returns again, is renewed. And so Dionysus becomes god of the promise of new life, of resurrection. He is typically accompanied by Maenades and satyrs. Let's go to the next image. Maenades and satyrs in constant celebration of various festivities held far removed in dark forests and open glades. His devotees try to arrive at a point of ecstasis. This literally means to stand out of one's own body. This ecstatic state was facilitated by drinking fair amounts of wine. Now, Maenades were women who were inducted by the Dionysian rites into a frenzy. In Euripides' Bacchae, once in the moment of divine madness, the Maenades could tear animals with their bare hands, but could also handle snakes and were impervious to both iron and fire. They even ate raw meat at times, the animal aspect fully animated, you may say. As for the actual Maenades, we know that in the middle of every other winter, women from all over Greece suddenly took off their shoes, let their hair down, and disappeared into the woods, shouting out to the mountains as they left their homes and perhaps their bewildered menfolk. So beware, if you hear your loved one yell to the mountains. Of course, the men did leave them alone, for it was legendary that those who offended the gods were cursed with eternal madness. After a sacrifice of various cakes in the woods or higher places, they danced all night to the accompaniment of the tympanion and flutes. The dancing was amidst torches all around, and they began to twirl and round, wildly throwing their unbound hair about in their full manes, while jumping and shouting. Often the word "ew, oi." The music would build a momentum faster and faster. Eventually, they would reach the climax of their mystic experience, feeling the frenzy of ecstatic euphoria or ecstasy, after which they fell to the ground. The story goes that any male observer stood the chance of being, well, torn limb for limb by these women in the midst of their divine ecstasy. And so men, yes, they did tend to stay away. Of course, Greek myths were plentiful about unfortunate men who did chance to view the mysteries. Naturally, stories of agoristic feasts and debauchery followed this ritual. And there is evidence that this may be true, at least in some cases. Let's go to the next image. As for the origins of Dionysus, much evidence points to the fact that this god came from the fertility cults like that of Tammuz from the ancient East. The earliest reference to the god Dionysus is from a Linear B tablets from Pylos in Crete, dating from around 1250 BCE, demonstrating that the Mycenaeans had already incorporated this god into their pantheon. These tablets refer to both Zeus and Dionysus as jointly receiving libations of honey. From the Aegean Sea, the Dionysian cult spread to Thrace, according to ancient sources, and finally arrived in Greece. One myth tells how his mother, Semele, died before she could give birth to him. To keep him alive, Zeus took the infant Dionysus from his mother's womb and, get this, transferred it to his own thigh. After Dionysus was born from the leg of Zeus, he was entrusted in Hermes' care, who handed him to a group of nymphs living in the mountains of Nysa, and who, of course, then raised him at that time. So there you have that. In the mind of the ancients, the widespread, enchanting, and intoxicating madness of Dionysus drew upon the inner drives of Bacchic celebrants. It consumed them with unbridled energy and inspiration arising from the wild element of nature. As Carl Careni states, no other god of the Greeks is as widely present in the monuments and nature of Greece and Italy as the sensuous tradition of antiquity as Dionysus. Let's go to the next image. For instance, yeah, there it is. For instance, the grand facade of the Theater of Pergae in current-day Turkey contains one of the finest friezes that depict the early life of Dionysus. He's shown as he's a young Dionysus with a wreath decorated with ivy leaves and pine cones upon, and of course, obviously, he has shoulder-length curly hair and seated upon a carriage harnessed to two panthers. You saw also in the image I just showed you earlier, the votive offering, you can see it was a long-haired, beardless Dionysus. In fact, in art, Dionysus is often showed as wearing wreaths of vines, riding felines, carrying a rod called a thyrsus, sailing on the sea, and often even depicted as having a fine set of wings. Dionysus also found his way upon monuments of death, especially upon Greek and Roman sarcophagi, because of his possible connection to immortality. As for his appearance, Dionysus either appears young, effeminate, and nude, or mature, masculine, and with a beard and wearing a long robe, a chiton, draped with fawn or feline skin. Let's go to the next image. From vine to theater, Dionysus cultivated the root and inspired stage expression. Yes, Dionysus was also known as the god of drama, was known as the god of theater. Some scholars claim theater to the satyrs, the constant attendant of the gods. Doubtless, satyrs played a big role in theater, finding themselves in a number of roles. Even the word tragedy itself in Greek means goat song. The intoxicated revelries of Dionysus were understood as kamos. And again, many scholars believe this was the source of the word comedy in drama. According to Aristotle, the origins of tragedy and comedy arrive from the Dionysian phallic song. Of course, the chorus of these dramatic events often identified themselves with Dionysus as well as the Maenads. Dionysus was a god of contrasts. Let's go to the next image. He was both the fierce male bull and as well as the gentle, effeminate sage. So you can see here, of course, right here, this is an image of some dismemberment here. These are Maenads. What do you think? He's not doing very well, right? Definitely being torn asunder. Let's go to the next image. Oh, man, there we go. So there you have it. While Jane Ellen Harrison agreed with anthropologists of her day that Dionysus is one of his aspects a nature god, a god who comes and goes with the seasons, who has, like Demeter and Kore, like Adonis and Osiris, his epiphanies and recessions at his very mystic core. At the same time, there's more to him. So I'm going to go ahead and you can see me for this next one. So according to Walter Burkert, there's more to Dionysus. Dionysus can seemingly be defined, he says, quite simply as the god of wine and of intoxicated ecstasy. Intoxication as a change in consciousness is interpreted as the interruption of something divine. But the experience of Dionysus goes far beyond that of alcohol and may be entirely independent of it. Madness becomes an end in itself. Mania, the Greek word, denotes frenzy, not as the ravings of delusion, but as its etymological connection with memos would suggest as an experience of intensified mental power. Nevertheless, Dionysian ecstasy is not something achieved by an individual on his own. It is a mass phenomena and spreads almost infectiously. So you have to have a group that are all together. Some people call this mob madness, right? But it's a frenzy of group worship. Now, by making the distinction in mania or mania as frenzy rather than delusion, Walter Burker is attempting to liberate scholarship from the Germanic romantic notion of identifying two kinds of religion: one calm and intellectual, and so connected to Apollo or Apollonian, and the other ecstatic and irrational, and thus Dionysian. The roots of these labels arrived in the 18th century from literary criticism. So you have this here, and so, but at the same time, there's more to this. And what I want to do is I want to have a little fun here. I want to go into an example from ancient times of still this contrast of Dionysus, which is like, say, for example, in connection to Apollo. Now, for example, here it is. Um, Once upon a time, there was Pentheus. He was the king of Thebes, and he was understood as representing the rational side of human nature, upholding the polis and the conventions of morality that maintain order. Pentheus believed this astounding scandal created by an upstart god through intoxication was causing their women to go creeping off to lonely places and convincing these disloyal vessels to surrender themselves to lecherous men, according to Euripides Bacchae. Now, Tiresias' support, in Pentheus' estimation, could not be a result of a legitimate passion to worship Dionysus, but instead, he accused the prophet of introducing a new god in order to advance your augur's business to collect more fees for inspecting sacrifices. He perceives Dionysus as an instructor of lunacy, he says, who spreads a new disease and fouls the whole land with lechery. This is not great PR for these mystery religions. Are you following this? And remember, this is Euripides. These are public plays. And you can see here there is criticism at this time towards these mystery beliefs. In reaction to this offense, Pentheus must uphold the law at all costs and bring the foreigner, the outsider, to justice. Yet Pentheus commits hubris because he trusts his own power to carry out his objective and not the gods. Tiresias scolds the king for his arrogance. He says, "You rely on force, but it is not force that governs human affairs. Do not mistake for wisdom that opinion which may rise from a sick mind." Here, the prophet interrupts Pentheus and what he represents as a disease needing a remedy. This illness may be linked to the king's inability to realize his own non-rational, animalistic tendencies. In any case, Dionysus realizes his ultimate revenge when he uses the king's incessant inquisitive nature for knowledge against him, perking his curiosity of the Bacchic rites to the degree that Pentheus is willing, in his deluded state, caused by his hubris, to parade out into the streets of Thebes dressed as a woman. If Pentheus represents the national side of man's nature, Dionysus symbolizes the irrational or the unexplainable in nature. In many ways, Dionysus in the Bacchae does appear like a Christ figure. Now, I'm not saying that it is a Christ figure per se, but you can see the likening aspect. For example, both are divine and human. They descend from a mortal mother, right? And of course, a virgin mother and a Zeus, the great father God himself. It may be said that Dionysus literally came out of the divine essence when he emerged out of the son of Cronus' thigh. Because of this, the wine god is called twice born. From this perspective, then he becomes understood from that time as being born again. Dionysus also performed many signs and miracles, and when it came time for his trial, he was presented as gentle and very humble, and he permits himself to be bound. Yet this gift from the gods is more than sustenance for survival. It is a divine blessing that bestows relief from the daily toil and gives to life more than simply the bare necessities. In fact, Tiresias declares, when mortals drink their fill of wine, the suffering of our unhappy race are banished. Each day's troubles are forgotten in sleep. For Dionysus himself, a god, is thus poured out in offering to the gods, so that through him comes the blessing of humankind. That is a quote from Euripides. You see any parallels? Paul, as the apostle of Christ, said of Christ as being poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrifice and service of the faith of the brethren, and counted all joy in Philippians 2:17. Well, that's very much a very strong parallel to what we just read in Euripides, and the same kind of idea. Like Dionysus, Christ's offering results in special blessings. The moral is best summarized by the chorus, the moral, which says that, quote, that he who best enjoys each passing day is truly blessed. In contrast to Pentheus and the newer establishment he represents, Tiresias, unashamed of his Bacchic dress and ivory wreath, despite his age, tells the proud king, we have no use for theological subtleties. Can't believe he said that, right? The beliefs we have inherited as old as time cannot be overthrown by any argument, nor by the most inventive ingenuity. Continues that many may claim, of course, that, it says this, blessed is the happy man who knows the mysteries the gods ordain and sanctifies his life, joins soul with soul in mystic unity, and by due ritual made pure, enters the ecstasy of mountain solitudes, who observes the mystic rites made lawful by Cybele, the great mother, who crowns his head with ivy and shakes aloft his wand in worship of Dionysus. I mean, you're seeing this. Now, I want to make it very clear, I'm not the only one who's seen it, and ancient, and of course, modern scholars are not the only ones who are seeing this. This was seen at this time. Early Christians did write about this. They wrote about this in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries. They did see these parallels. This is no mystery here. But in fact, scholarship linking Christianity with Dionysian mysteries is, legion. Of course, on the surface, the parallels are worthy of note. Naturally, much of the focus relates to wine symbolism, since Dionysus was the god of wine and constituted an intimate part of his mysteries. And as readers of the New Testament will readily admit, Jesus often refers to wine within some rather curious contexts. For example, what about the marriage feast of Cana in the Gospel of John, the story where Jesus turns the water into wine? This is a revelation that he is superior to Dionysus. It can be in his miraculous powers. For while Dionysus may create wine, it is understood that Jesus is able to do one better, turning any substance, even water, into wine, revealing he represents or possesses supreme authority over the natural elements. But let's go a little bit further, though, because you may not know this. And here we go. So let's go to a few images here. I want to show you this, and then beware. There's the Mysti in their state of ecstasy. You can see there was a tympanion there and the flute. Let's go to the next image. That's great. Wow. You can see the image of these revelries here. Next image. Yeah, more. And of course, Dionysus here is bearing the beard. Next image. We're Dionysus. And let's go to the next one here. Okay. According to Pausanias, he says, he's writing in the 2nd century, Between the marketplace and the Menaios in the city of Elis is an old theater and a shrine of Dionysus. The image is the work of Praxiteles. Of the gods, the Hellenes worship Dionysus with the greatest reverence, and they assert that the god attends their festival, the Thea. The place where they hold the festival, they name the Thea, is about 8 stages from the city. 3 pots are brought into the building by the priests and set down empty in the presence of the citizens and of any strangers who may chance to be in the country. Okay, so they're brought in by the priests. The doors of the building are sealed by the priests themselves and by any others who may be so inclined. On the morrow, they are allowed to examine the seals, and on going into the building, they find the pots filled with wine. I'm just reading this. This is from ancient times. I did not myself arrive at the time of the festival, but the most respected alien citizens, and with them strangers, also swore that what I have said is true, unquote. Now, this is a little interesting here. You have this transformation right here and it becomes wine. Let's see me a little bit. So here we have 2 of the 3 components of the miracle of Cana, the pots and the miraculous appearance of the wine. Just the water part is missing. Scholars since Bultmann have argued that the priest filled the vessels with water first, which then in turn became wine in the morning. Whether this is true or not, there's just certain similarities. However, more impressive still, according to Pliny the Elder, he's from the 1st century BC, the 1st century CE, in his natural history, at both Andros and Teos, water originating from a spring located within the local temple of Dionysus miraculously transformed into wine on his feast days. Now, when were these feast days? January 5th and January 6th. Now, it must be noted that according to early Christian calendars, the marriage feast at Cana in the traditional Christian calendar was traditionally placed on January 6th. Coincidence? Well, in the case of the pots of Elis, we cannot prove that Dionysus turned the water into wine. The stories circulating from Teos and Andros did indeed contain the miraculous change of water turning into wine, but minus the pots. Also in the Gospel of John, Jesus declares, I am the true vine. Well, that's what your English says. It doesn't really say that. It actually says, I am the vine, the true one. What does that mean? I am the vine. It is a Greek opposition meant to contrast with a false vine. Well, what would be the false? Oh, Jesus turning the water into wine. Remember, at this time, these ideas are common knowledge that Dionysus is doing these kinds of transformations. So the chances, and of course, it's interesting that there are places dedicated to the worship of Dionysus all over where Jesus grew up. In fact, they have found images of image of Dionysus from Sepphoris, which is 4 miles from his home, and you have to, so this is not out of the sphere of possibility that there is this connection that is being made. Now, this is interesting. Let's go one step further. According, of course, obviously this idea is that the wine is connected with eternal life, both, of course, for the Dionysian belief system and, of course, for Christianity. According to Tiresias, of course, there are 2 powers that are supreme in human affairs. First, Demeter, who supplies mankind with solid food, and after her comes Dionysus, Semele's son, counterpart to that of bread, the juice of the grape. So you got, of course, this idea is that in the Dionysian rituals, their sacred meals and their festivities, and part of the mystery cult was a communal meal of, yes, bread and wine symbolism. This is common knowledge, right? Of course, the importance of the bread and wine symbolism continues on in the Christian Eucharist. One version of a Dionysian feast connects more to the story popularized by Orphism, where Dionysus is consumed by Titans sent by a jealous Hera. In commemoration of this titanic act, some devotees of the cult were said to have taken a live animal as a substitute for Dionysus and tear it apart piece by piece, limb by limb, literally eating the raw meat. Naturally, rumors spread that they did the same with live human beings, which is not true, but maybe, referring to the Maenads and other legends supporting such stories of cannibalism. So the Romans are telling stories of cannibalism. Why this has no relation to the Christian Eucharist, it doesn't. It still has every relation to the surrounding perception of early Christians who were accused of cannibalism. Of course, the fact that Christians would declare that the bread and wine were the body and blood of their Christ naturally led to the presupposition that there is a direct connection between these two rituals. How could they not see such a connection? How could they not? Right? Now let's talk about blood here, right? For a while, right? Right? As noted, for both Dionysus and Christ were associated with the blood and the vine, with their blood as the wine. And furthermore, that this blood did indeed represent not only death, but the renewal of life to come. So what we're doing is we're learning all about the Dionysian secret mysteries, but we're learning also why people think Christianity is a mystery cult too. This is making sense. So we are focusing on Dionysus, but we're learning as a result a lot about the confusion when it comes to Christianity. We must recollect that the vine of Dionysus to the ancient Greeks always represented new life arriving from the old, of life springing from death. According to many ancient Greeks, when Ariadne was abandoned by King Theseus on Naxos and she fell asleep, it was a god Dionysus who discovered her and made her his wife. This story was taken by many Dionysian devotees as representing as an allegory of the soul awakening from death. That Dionysus had regenerative abilities, not only in nature, but also for humans too. Hence, Dionysus was proclaimed as Lysios, which means, well, Lysios, you know what Lysios means? If it translated, it becomes Redeemer. Dionysus was literally declared the Redeemer. With the power, the Dionysian believers said, of deliverance and even resurrection for all. And the key here was the power of the vine, the blood of the vine, which was the wine, the regenerative gift bestowed to all who chose to accept as so. You see, the power was in the wine and hence in the blood for new life. In many ways, Dionysus in the Bacchae appears like Christ, both divine and human, descending from a mortal, as we talked about before. So we talked about these connections. So there are many theological subtleties that we really have to think about. I also want to mention, and I want to go into detail about it, that, and there's a long, long bit I have on this, is that the Dionysian rituals were associated with fire, and so people running with torches and so forth. And so what will happen is Livy, a Roman historian, will write about the fact that these worshipers are causing these problems, and so they make prohibitions in law against these Bacchic worshipers. Well, what I want to say is, interestingly enough, is later on Cornelius Tacitus, in his depiction of the fire of Rome, but done by Nero in the year 64 CE, it turns out if you take a look at the passage of Livy and the passage from Tacitus, it's a parallel that the accusations against the Christians are exactly, in fact, sometimes same as word for word that was against those of Dionysian worshippers or those who were connected to the Bacchae, word for word, as well as the various edicts and laws that were connected to the Roman law against the Dionysian worshippers at that time. So again, we have another parallel. In fact, there's even more materials I don't have time to go into. I just will say this because I want to jump into another interesting topic. But I want to say this very clearly that absolutely 100% Greeks and Romans confused those who are worshipers of Dionysus with worshipers of Christ. We see that all over the place. And the misunderstandings that went towards those who are Dionysian worshipers were then transferred over to Christians as well, especially cannibalism and burning down things. So there you have it. Okay, but we're going to move on to Orphism. I want to go on to the next bit. So what's interesting, let's go to the next two images. I just want to show you a few things. It's interesting that the early Christian art combines elements of Dionysus and Orpheus, as you can see right here, or in the catacombs. Let's go to another image. Yeah, do you see it, or it's just me? Yeah, Jesus is a good shepherd, but you're seeing obviously connections to both to the Dionysian ideas and Orphism. In fact, let's just go to the Orphic rites. Let's go to the next image. Hi, Orpheus. So there we go. So you get the idea. So let's talk about Orphism. Dionysus in relation to Orphism. I've had some people mishear me when I talked about this topic, asking me just how Dionysus relates to a bunch of orphans. Well, the word Orphism relates to the person of Orpheus, the supposed founder of this particular stream of belief. And from my knowledge, I don't recollect him leaving any orphans behind. But anyway, well, maybe said that Orphism today is better understood than it was when Guthrie wrote his classic work, Orpheus and Greek Religion. Still at the same time, there's still some of the major ideas here. Orpheus himself remains a shadowy composite figure, often blurring with another ancient singer named Musaeus, and as a result, the two are often indistinguishable. Sometimes they're seen as the same. As for Orpheus himself, we are definitely dealing closely with the realm of legend, of myth. The reputed date for the musical sage resides somewhere prior to the time of Homer, a likewise shadowy and uncertain figure and composer of songs. Ideally, Orpheus is projected into the Homeric age. We have, of course, have a fly in our pristine ointment with Herodotus, who believes that the poems of Homer were earlier than all the rest, Orpheus included. But anyway, as for the place of birth, the Argonautica, the 3rd century BC author, Apollonius Rhodus, has Orpheus himself declaring his own origins, so I will just read it. Thence I made all speed to snowy Thrace, to the land of the Labathrians, my own fatherland, and I entered the far-famed cave where my mother conceived me on the bed of the great-hearted Ogras. Unquote. While as early as the time of Pindar in the 6th century BCE, Orpheus is mentioned as a participant in the expedition of Jason the Argonauts in search of the Golden Fleece. Most of the details of his supposed journey on the Argos arrive from Apollonius Rhodius, and as well as Valerius Flaccus, and as well as an anonymous poet from the 4th century. Despite the fact that Orpheus is not endowed with the typical strength of the other heroes on this voyage, he possesses the magical power of music, the ability to sing and play the lyre in such a manner as to stop the quarreling of his fellow crew members. By the way, I think we need that kind of ability. That's, to me, that is true heroism. If anybody through music can stop people from arguing, that's a divine gift, especially in our times. Anyway, moving right along, right? And so basically, he was also through his magical music was able the Argos to move of its own accord, make the dragon guarding the golden fleece fall into a deep sleep, even to calm the stormy seas. That's right, to make nature herself yield to his powers of entrancement. So he plays the music and the seas are calm. In fact, at one point, he was even known to charm the clashing rocks as the Argos passed through in safety with his musical gifts. Beyond being a masterful and I must add mystical musician, Orpheus was also a leader in religious affairs, often officiating like a priest within various contexts, um, uh, whether performing sacrifices, inducting his crews in the mysteries of Samothrace, or performing purification rites at Malea. His prayers, in particular, were viewed as a powerful weapon against evil and the force preserving good. Inevitably, we must bring up the famous story of Orpheus' descent into Hades for his wife Eurydice. Let's go to the next image. According to Pausanias, writing in the 2nd century BCE, in the scene of Hades painted by Polygnost at Delphi, active around 450 to 420 BC, Orpheus is presented without his wife, leading many to wonder if the reference to his wife was a secondary addition to the story. Yet with this said, we do have a very well-known relief of Orpheus, Eurydice, and Hermes dating to around 400 BCE, early enough to reveal that the story of his wife was already well established and may constitute another tradition. So who is the wife of Orpheus? Stories vary. Sometimes she was also known as Agrope, which means wild-eyed or wild-voiced. In some versions, she was a nymph from Thrace, or even a Dryad, who was so enraptured by his music that she fell in love with this mere mortal and decided to become his wife. Unfortunately, fate played the cruel game of taking Orpheus's wife all too soon, the victim of a fatal snake bite. According to Virgil, she was actually fleeing an obsessed and unwanted lover, as by the name of Aristaeus, when she accidentally stepped on a venomous snake. Destroyed in heart and soul, and even despairing of life itself for his love so torn asunder from his warm embrace, Orpheus casts his pain into a plaintive and pathetic but beautiful song. He's so sad. She is gone. Unaware of his divine invocation, shades and guardians of the dead alike were moved to the point where the gods permitted Orpheus to enter into Hades and bring forth his wife to life and love once more. Next image, of course. The question is, what occurred after that? For this, we have two versions. In the first version, which is lesser known, which I like better, Orpheus actually succeeds in his harrowing mission, and the sweetness of love is renewed again to the flower of spring. This is the version according to Euripides, as well Listus, as well as the poet Hermogenes. Yet according to Plato, Orpheus was only permitted to see the ghost of his beloved wife rather than receiving his wife back in flesh and blood. The intended lesson meant to demonstrate that the courageous act would have been to join her in death rather than cheat death itself, that he should have just let himself die. Following the loss of his wife, Orpheus began a prolonged period of mourning at the banks of the Strymon River. So great was his pain that in many versions of the story, Orpheus decided to avoid the company of women altogether, the very women, in fact, who made up much of his entourage. According to the Alexandrian poet Phanocles, while shunning women, he began to desire men and became credited as the first homosexual lover. Either way, it was the women who were his undoing. Now the actual reasons vary. For the playwright Aeschylus, Orpheus was actually a devoted worshiper of Apollo, the god of the sun and music, rather than Dionysus, and was described as habitually climbing up the great mountain Targarian every morning to worship his Olympian god. After a while, Dionysus became jealous of Orpheus' solitary devotion to Apollo and the Olympian order, which represented the polar opposite of his dark, wild ways. Resolute to putting an end to the charade, Dionysus set his Maenads, those frenzied female devotees of his mysteries, after Orpheus one night, who proceeded to tear the poet limb by limb into tiny pieces. According to Virgil, specifically because of his poor treatment of the female sex after the death of his wife, a group of women, likewise in Bacchic frenzy, tore him apart. Just when you thought it was over for Orpheus, there's more. Well, you see, while his body, what was left of it, remained in Thrace, the enraged women threw his head and lyre into the Hebros River. Next image. That's right. Where both head and musical instrument continued out to sea and on to the island of Lesbos. The head somehow singing all the way there. Panocles says those who are the lesbians buried the head, and Lucian seems to confirm the story, discussing the great temple of Bacchus on the site. Yet we also have the tradition that the head was not at first actually buried, but used as a famous oracle, telling of prophecies for those willing to hear. 5th century BC, Greek vases, and even Philostratus as late as the 3rd century CE confirmed the story of the dismemberment as well as the prophesying head. After a while, Apollo thought enough was enough. Perhaps he was jealous because he was known as a great oracle deity, and forthwith silenced the head Orpheus. Well, so this has everything to do, believe it or not, of the Orphic mysteries. What? Yeah, I'm giving you away the mystery. So let's go one step further. There's another part of the story that I'm going to bring up. It's going to be hard for you to hear, but before I go there, I will say this, is that hence I will say this, that Orpheus, having gone to the realm of Hades, to the realm of shades, been there, experienced it, knew the way in, and knew and learned the sacred geography enough so that in his prophecies, he knew how to avoid certain aspects of death in order to find new life. Does that make sense? He had the secret, and then his rolling head continued to tell these secrets away. And yes, in a few moments, don't worry, I'm going to divulge the secrets. I am going to tell you the secrets. So wait, but first we have to tell one more story. Sorry. According to this story, there's also the Orphics were fond of theogonies. Hesiod has a grand one in general. But basically the story goes as this. Zeus basically got with his mother, Rhea, Demeter, and through his mother sired Persephone. And then, and that was awful, he went unto his daughter Persephone in the form of a snake and sired Dionysus. To the child Dionysus, then, since he's mostly him, he hands over the rule of the world. He places him on the throne and has him guarded by the Corybantes. Guess who's upset about this whole thing, other than me? Hera. Oh, yeah, his wife. Hera, then, angry, sends the Titans, who are, they're spiritual, but they're material. It's kind of connected to this. He sends these Titans who distract the child with toys, and while the child is looking into a mirror, he is dragged from the throne. He's killed, and he's torn to pieces, and then he's broiled, roasted, and eaten. Zeus doesn't know what to do. So thereupon, he hurls his thunderbolt to burn the Titans. And from the rising soot springs humanity, men. You see how this works is this, he destroys, remember, his Dionysian stuff is spirit, right? But this Dionysus was eaten by these material-laden Titans. They're the material realm. And so when he destroys them, the particles, there's a mixture between Dionysian spirit and Titanic material. And so that means when he makes humanity out of that, we as humans then have two natures. We have our spiritual nature, which is our Dionysian spirit, and our Titanic flesh, and they are at battle with one another. Oh no, this is a huge idea. It's enormous. It's part of the Orphic mysteries. Oh no, yes. So let's keep going. In this myth, then, the human condition is divided between a divine Dionysian spirit and evil Titanic flesh. In the Greek world, the repressive Titanic nature of humanity was proverbial, expressing an innate evil nature that is exhibited by disobedience, according to Plato, disobedience to authorities, to parents, and to laws, says Plato. This evil soma was considered by the Greeks as the tomb sema of the soul. The followers of Orpheus gave this name sema especially to the body. So they describe the body as the tomb because the soul is punished for that which it is punished, and it seems to have this covering, this likeness of a prison, in order that it may be kept in custody until it has paid its due debt. The correlation of Orphism, oh no, I know, here we go again, and Christianity, with its duality between spirit and flesh, inward and divinely inspired goodness within the person, in opposition to inborn evil natures stemming from wicked beings, whether Titans or Satan and his demons, and afterlife with rewards and punishments is really obvious and needs no further elaboration. I won't elaborate, just you get the idea. The Orphic belief in the soul as a divine part of the body, divine part, excuse me, and the body as the impure part of man, gives a deeper meaning to asceticism and various prohibitions, right? It also connects to Pythagorean views. They also believe in the idea of metempsychosis, or the transmigration of souls, often identified with the Pythagoreans as well. So Orphics, remember, I want to mention that the Orphic mysteries were adopted by Pythagoras. So Pythagoras was a follower of Orphism. That's going back to the 6th century BCE. Wow. So we have this idea of Pythagoras connecting with this idea. And so that means Neo-Pythagoreanism and Orphism kind of work together. So for one, of course, when it comes to connections between the two, for one, it characterizes the followers of Orpheus as believers in a life after death, of the continuation of the soul's existence as an individual entity. Now, before reaching the final destination, whether in the land of reward, in some cases at Elysium, or in the realm of punishment, Tartarus, the soul is involved in a period of reincarnation, usually thought to last 3 cycles. Also, the Orphic circles held that a soul, just like the Pythagoreans, could reincarnate within an animal form. So to kill any living thing was scathing, as committing suicide. Therefore, like the Pythagoreans, followers of Orphism avoided meat, and animal products. And so there are indeed parallels. But all this is put together. All this is put together. Let's go to the next image. With the golden tablets. What do you mean? You have golden tablets? You mean there's a religion that has actual golden tablets? I mean, you've heard other religions that have golden tablets. But these, we've actually discovered golden tablets. Oh, these golden tablets connected to Orphism are found throughout the Mediterranean. You can find them at the Getty, beginning in the 6th century BCE. Often these golden sheets, called lamellae, were folded with the ashes of the deceased in their urns. Upon these Orphic tablets were engraved specific instructions for the deceased on how to navigate through the underworld in order to achieve salvation. One golden lamellae from Thessaly in northern Greece describes a dead soul as thirsty and shows how it is guided to a spring of water that will refresh and revive it. Yet before the soul may drink it, it is asked questions regarding its origins. The soul states a standard formula of salvation and tells the questioner that it is only half terrestrial, for the other half is celestial in origin. With this pronounced divine spark, the soul is permitted then to move on to paradise. And so this was placed. This is how they got to the other side. This is the secret of Orpheus. I'm giving them away here. So let's go to the next image. There we go. Okay, so I'm reading some Lamai. Here we go. So you see it both in Greek there and in English. It says, "Thou shalt find to the left of the house of Hades a wellspring, and by the side thereof standing a white cypress. To this wellspring approach not near." So don't get near the wild cypress. "But thou shalt find another by the lake of memory, cold water flowing forth, and there are guardians before it." So what are you to say to these guardians guarding this lake of memory, where it can unlock the secrets of your previous lives and you will be released? You say, "I am a child of earth and of starry heaven. By my race is of Uranus. This ye know yourselves, and lo, I am parched with thirst, and I perish. Give me quickly the cold water flowing forth from the lake of memory. And of themselves they will give thee to drink from the holy wellspring, and thereafter amongst other heroes thou shalt have lordship." What do you think? There it is. It's a secret. I just gave you, memorize that. Let's go to the next one. You're not happy with that one? Let's go to the next image. Okay. Or you can say this. Yes, of course, this is another part. "I am dry with thirst and I am perishing. But permit me to drink from the everlasting spring on the right, there by the cypress. But who are you? Where do you come from?" "I am a son of earth and starry sky." Hey, let's go to the next image. I just want to reinforce this. There are lots of tablets. This is a good one too. "Pure I come from the earthly pure ones, earthly queen, you know, Evclis, and of course, Ebolis, and the other many gods and daemons. For I pray also, being of your happy lineage, I have paid retribution for my unjust works. Either destiny overpowered me, or the thunderbolts of the lightning hurler. But now I, the suppliant, come to purple clad, Persephone, so that she may graciously send me to the seats of brightness." So here Persephone is a saving figure within the Orphic mysteries. Let's go to the next one. Next image. And there's another image. Oh, okay. The next image didn't show. That's fine. So there you have it. The secret of the Dionysian mysteries. We move on, of course, to the cult of Magna Mater. This is yet another mystery cult, which is hierarchical, exclusive, and exotic, with very strange rituals and a troop of adherents who castrated themselves and often performed violent acts of self-flagellation. Even though the cult arrived in Rome as early as 204 BCE, mass appeal for the cult was slow and only expanded significantly in the first century CE, especially under the Emperor Claudius. Eventually, however, the cult of Magna Mater accommodated to synchronistic and universalistic pressure, as well as to create an ingenious rite of individual initiation, which is called the Taurobolium. What is the Taurobolium? Well, basically what happens is that you're initiated through the bull, through the blood of the bull. And what they do is they put you into this pit. There's metal grating above. The bull is placed above you. The bull is slain. The blood floods all over your body. You're to be drenched with it, and it gives you salvation for 7 years. You're saved through the blood. Of course, after the 7 years are up, you have to do it all over again. And those bowls are kind of expensive. I know you say that's a bunch of bull, but it really is. The cult of Magna Mater comes from Pessinus in Phrygia, the heartland of various ecstatic traditions. See there. Of course, obviously, what will happen here. Well, I did talk about this last time, so you want to refer to this. But so this is Phrygia. And the story is, of course, of the goddess and a boy named Attis. Let's go to the next image. Accordingly, the goddess, also known as Cybele, inspired the first accompanied music by pipes and drums, and was a great healer, using her magical powers to cure the sick, especially children and animals. One day she fell in love with the prince Attis, but this love story would end in tragedy. In one version of the story, Attis fell so deeply in love that he became obsessed with the divine lady to the point of insanity. He castrated himself and died. Cybele, deranged and lost in despair, traveled about the countryside in search of her lost lover. Let's go to the next image. Of course, this is the simple version of the story. There are even more complicated versions that I guess I will go dive into a little bit. In the 4th century, Arnobius records a more complicated story. Told of Pessinus in Phrygia, local legend established that the famous Agdos, the great mound where Deucalion and Pyrrha picked up the stones to throw behind their backs in order to reestablish the human race after the great flood, this great mound, this great stone, was also infused with the vitality of the great mother goddess. It was, in essence, her in stone form. Let's go to the next image. This is an image of it. Her in stone form. Yeah, okay, so Zeus, being Zeus, attempted to seduce the great mother and manages to have relations with the great goddess stone, impregnating it. Soon, Agdistis is born of the strange union, a bisexual child who was neither male or female and filled with rage against mortals and immortals alike. Determined to place limits on the hermaphrodite, the gods determined he must be made into one gender. Dionysus gets Agdistis drunk, and once he falls asleep, the god of wine ties one of his testicles to his feet. Once Agdistis wakes up, he emasculates himself, and from the flow of his blood, a pomegranate tree is born. Now, a certain Nana, the daughter of the local king Sangaros, is enraptured by the sight of the pomegranate tree. A desire to have just one pomegranate. All she did was pick it from the tree and place it upon her bosom. And yes, she became pregnant. In reaction to her pregnancy, her father had her locked away, intending her to starve to death. But Cybele would not permit Nana to die and fed her through her magical ways. When Nana gave birth, the king took the child away from her and ordered the infant to be exposed out in the wild, left to die. This was Attis. Cybele loved both Attis and now the eunuch Agdistis, but Agdistis fell in love with Attis. This sounds like just a really interesting soap opera to me. And Attis was interested in having relations with the eunuch in return. King Midas of Pessinus tried to convince Attis to forsake Agdistis and take the hand of his daughter in marriage. Attis agreed. King Midas set up the day of the great wedding with his daughter, locking up the city walls so no one would be able to disturb the ceremony. But, of course, obviously, Cybele, knowing the destiny of the youth and that he would never be safe amongst men unless he could escape the bonds of marriage, threw herself headfirst against the walls of Pessinus, which from then on was the reason for her being crowned with towers. The eunuch Agdistis was not far behind, breaking up the ceremony, and through his powers, or her powers, imparted insane rage upon the attendant, making the bride cut off her breasts and King Midas to castrate himself. Meanwhile, Attis, fallen into a trance-like state, runs out into the wilderness, cuts off his genitals, and then falls at the base of a pine tree. Yes, this is the story that is used for the mystery belief system. I did actually have to tell you this entire story because this is part of the mysteries. I apologize that it was long and a soap opera, but this is what happens. Well, so we will go on. According to Arnobius, the mother of the gods sheds tears also, from which springs an almond tree, signifying the bitterness of death. Then she bears away to her cave the pine tree, beneath which Attis had unmanned himself, and Agdistis, joining in her wailings, she beats and wounds her breasts, pacing around the trunk of the tree, now at rest. Jupiter is begged by Agdistis that Attis may be restored to life. Here it is, which you didn't hear last time. we heard last week, be restored to life. He does not permit it. What, however, fate allows, he readily grants, that his body should not decay, that his hair should always grow, and that the least of his fingers should live, and should be kept ever in motion, content with which these favors. It is said that Aegisthus consecrated the body in Pessinus and honored it with yearly rites and priestly services. So this is the origin of these stories, right? As we know it. So what happens now is that these stories, let's go to the next image. I'm going to, this is a site. I'm actually going to skip this image. This is the more conservative site dedicated to Cybele in Athens. It is definitely more, again, conservative. They kind of look down upon the mysteries, so to speak. But there you have it. But let's go to the next image. And that is, yes, that this cult, this belief system was brought to Rome. In fact, what happens is that there was a prophecy of the Sabine oracles that promised that if this Cybele was the Idaean mother of gods, was brought from Pessinus to Rome, Rome would win the battles. And so this image was brought to Rome, and eventually a temple, let's go to the next image, was dedicated. There's the ruins of it to Cybele. Let's go to the next image. You can see what it looked like. That's actually an image of the temple, what it looked like in ancient times. So it's pretty darn cool there. Okay, so go to the next image. And let's go into the rites a little bit. I know we're kind of running short on time, but I want to get to a little bit more here. So what happens is this. Already by 191 BCE, the Phrygian goddess had her own temple on the Palatine Hill. But this public exposure of the cult was strictly in Roman terms. Traditional Roman games and festivals were held in the goddess's honor from April 4th to the 10th, while her attendants, the Galli, were restricted to the temple precinct by the Senate. When the Galli were allowed out, a privilege allowed only once a year during the April celebrations, they became an object of curiosity for the very conservative Romans. Dancing through the streets of Rome to the sounds of alae and tambourines, the Galli in their exotic getup with their feminine garments, long hair, and amulets were merely a novelty, an object of Roman amusement, and nothing at first to take seriously during the time of the Republic. Of course, that is going to change eventually. Having said that, on 2 occasions, the cult of Magna Mater became a very public belief system. 2 holidays spanning the latter part of March and the early part of April. We'll take this image down. It's just stuck here. The first great festival commemorated the castration and death of Attis. You mean you weren't kidding that you just told the story from the mystery cult? I wasn't kidding. So this first ceremony, again, this basically commemorated the castration and death of Attis, occurring between March 15th and March 25th. Now, the Canophori carried reeds and stalks to the temple together with the image of Attis. 9 days following of the penitence, where devotees abstain from meat products, bread, and certain fruits, like pomegranate, and wine. And then what happens, however, by the way, I want to say this. There's one beverage they're allowed to have, and that was milk. You could have as much milk as you wanted. No wine, but you could have milk. Most devotees also refrained from sexual activity, heightening the intensity of the revelry at the end, and perhaps the feeling of ecstasy that could encourage new initiates. The first momentous day was known as the Day of Blood and was the culmination of the mourning cycle. At a certain point during this day, the high priest gave a signal to his Galli, and they commenced an ecstatic dance that circumnavigated a sacred pine representing Attis. Falling into a frenzied state to the accompaniment of clarinet and cymbals, the Galli began to cut themselves with knives as they twirled in their dance of madness, with their consecrated blood spraying all over the tree and onto the altars. Some of them also beat their naked breasts with sharp pine cones, shedding still more blood. With the dance reaching a feverish pitch, the feeling of divine madness descended upon the crowd, already susceptible to suggestion because of their vigilant fasting. These people have not eaten for a while. They have had no activity. And now they're amidst this group frenzy. This prompted many to cross the sacred boundary and join in the manic dancing with the priests, with the sensation of ecstasy gripping their bodies and their minds succumbing to the call of Magna Mater. The initiates began mutilating their own bodies along with the Galli. The pace of the music now moved more rapidly. The rhythm of the mother goddess taking control. Around and around they went, faster and faster, creating a feeling of rising ecstasy, reaching the climax. At this moment, the men, once simply spectators or worshippers from afar, took a piece of broken glass or flint and, possessed by the ritualistic magic, cut off their male members, transforming into the Galli themselves. After their self-emasculation, when the music was over, they had nowhere else to go to but to join the priesthood. Within the day, the lower part of the stomach was tattooed, and when the wound healed, a gold leaf was placed over the spot. From then on, the new Galli wore the very feminine dress of a priestess and grew their hair long and lived life as a woman, but still residing within the confines of a temple or sacred precinct. Uh, pretty dramatic, right? But the March Madness, this is definitely March Madness, celebrations continued. 3 days of sorrow and grief for Attis followed the castration ceremony. According to Julian, the famous Roman emperor of the 4th century, he says, on the 3rd day, the holy and ineffable harvest of Gallus, the actual pine tree itself, representing Attis, was cut and then buried, much in the same way as Cybele buried the body of Attis, unquote. An all-night vigil followed. The worshippers chanted, have faith, they declared, O believer. God is saved. For us, salvation will emerge from his suffering, they proclaim. There it is. Of course, on the following day, March 25th, commenced the Hilaria, the day of joy, where Attis was proclaimed as resurrected. And so fertility again returned to the world through the power of Magna Mater. This is basically a spring fertility festival. The day was filled with music and dancing and feasting as the time of loss was over and the time of plenty began. 8 days later, another festival known as the Megalesia arrived. This festival, held from April 4th to April 10th, celebrated the arrival of the sacred black stone of Magna Mater to Rome. Typically, worshippers would offer up dishes called moritum to the goddess, which was a rather flavorful mixture of cheese and herbs. This was a time of pantomimes, theatrical performances, and major chariot races. According to some scholars, at the climax of this celebration, although it could really occur at any other time, a bull was castrated and sacrificed, with the new initiates of the Great Mother baptized in its blood. This ritual, as I mentioned, was called the Taurobolium. At first, the bull was simply sacrificed for its perceived potent powers, especially connected to its genitalia, as possibly referred to Clement of Alexandria in relation to the mother goddess, although goats were likewise sacrificed. But later, this act evolved into a complicated ritual that had sacrifice of the bull directly over the initiate, and we talked about the blood rolling, pouring over them. Perhaps the most famous conversion story connected to the making of a Galli arise from the 1st century BC Latin poet Catullus. Let's take a look at some of the Gali, those who are self-castrated, who now lived as female. Let's go to the next image. And as I read this part, the next image, well, there's a Gali right there. And okay. Okay, and it goes, this is, Catullus writes this in one of his poems. He tells a story of a certain Attis who is not the Attis of the famous story, but someone who will do what he did, the act of self-castration, as a result of his devotion to Cybele. I'll read part of the poem. Carried in a fast ship over profound seas, Attis, eager and hurried, reached the Phrygian grove, the goddess's dark places, crowned with woodland, and there, exalted by amorous rage, his mind gone, he cut off his testicles with a sharp flint. She then, change a pronoun, aware of her limbs without the man, while the ground was still spotted with flesh blood, quickly took in her snowy hands a tambourine, such as serves your initiates, Cybele instead of a trumpet, and shaking the hollow calf high with delicate fingers. Quivering, she began to sing to the troops. And of course, obviously, we do have a song that follows that. And it continues later on. It says, I am abject to, let's see, my feet have carried me to the grove of Ida to be amongst snow in the cold lairs of wild beasts. I shall visit their violent haunts. Where, O my land, can I imagine you are? My eyes desire you and narrows as it turns towards you. In this short interval, when my mind is unfrenzied, shall I be carried to forests from my far-off home, away from country, goods, friends, family, from forum, palestra, racecourse, and gymnasium? There is nothing for me but misery in those places, he says, or she says, of course, at that point. She talks about her former life and what she has now become. So it is definitely a conversion. Let's go to the next image and you can see for yourself. So these are some of the Gali that have gone through this conversion. Let's go to the next image. Wow, right? Yeah. There's one other part I wanted to read, but I'm trying to see if I can find it here, but I don't see it right off the top of my head. Okay, that's fine. So let's move on to the next one. The next image, the next one is the mysteries of Mithras. There we are. This was, of course, heightened during the veneration during the time of the Roman Empire, as its height was from the 1st through the 4th centuries. The god Mithras originated from ancient Persia, with his name originally meaning contract, agreement, or covenant. Much of what we know about Mithras arises via iconography rather than written sources. For example, there is a general agreement that Mithras was born out of a great rock, as testified by many images. Yet here there are variations, for sometimes he emerges from the rock as a child and other times as an adult. Typically, he is shown as wearing a Phrygian cap. Of course, Phrygia is in Central Asia Minor, which is a long ways from Persia, but you can see that. The next event, by the way, central to the cult of Mithras, in myth and iconography, is the image of the god slaying the bull, which always constitutes as the central image. As he slays the bull, Mithras is shown looking over his shoulder at Sol, which is the god of the sun, making it very obvious that this ritual action was directly connected to the sun. Certain minor features also often consist in the iconography of Mithras slaying the bull. For example, for some reason, a scorpion is often depicted as attacking the bull's genitals. A raven hovers over the bull or is landed upon it. As for the blood, a dog and a snake are shown as heading towards it, as if about to drink it. Let's go to the next image. The torchbearers, Chaltis and Chaltopatis, either represent the sun or are his close attendants. While Chaltis holds a torch pointed upright, Chaltopatis' torch is pointed downward, together representing the rising and the setting sun. although there are other interpretations, which we'll explore a little bit. According to the iconography, after he slays the bull, Sol, the sun, submits to Mithras, acknowledging his power. Following the birth of Mithras from the rock and his slaughtering of the bull in the presence of Sol, god of the sun, a great banquet commences where both Mithras and Sol sit together eating the slain bull. Let's go to the next image. Here it is. The Fiano Romano relief shows one of the torchbearers pointing a caduceus towards the base of the altar, igniting the fire here. As well, this is one side, there's the other side. Let's go to the next image. The caduceus, sacred to the messenger god Hermes, there it is, may represent the idea of the dispatch of souls. Finally, Mithras flies into heaven in his chariot. So you have that there. Wrapping around his body, 4 wings, and holds a key or 2 and a scepter in his hands. The symbol of the 4 seasons are often found on the wings, so it is not difficult to realize that this figure was connected to the seasons and time itself in some way. Many dedication inscriptions assert that this figure is Ahrimanius, or Ahriman, which is, of course, the Greek name for the demon Ahriman, according to Zoroastrianism. It is confirmed that Ahrimanus was one of the gods of the Mithraic pantheon, as evidence from inscriptions discovered at Ostia, as well as Rome, and even Pannonia. Zoroaster, according to Plutarch, Ahrimanios represented a darkness and ignorance versus Ahura Mazda, or Ahura Mazda, who represents light and knowledge. Mithras stood between both of them, attempting to keep the balance and the peace. In some cases, Ahrimanus was made to represent the Greek Hades, lord of the underworld, and so wasn't always inherently evil. As for the celebrations, most scholars, but not all, believe that December 25th was the Mithraic New Year in dedication to the birth of Mithras, and coincided with the festival of Nautilus Invicti, or the birth of the unconquerable sun, which, by the way, was the belief system that was connected to Constantine the Great. Secret oaths were sworn to never be divulged, and for the most part, they kept their word, for we know very little about their practices today. Accordingly, to the Suda, no one was permitted to be initiated into the mysteries of Mithras until he should show himself holy and steadfast by undergoing several graduated tests, unquote. Gregory of Nazianzus also mentions specific, quote, tests in the mysteries of Mithras, unquote. Jerome lists 7 grades of initiation. With initiation into each grade, the devotee had to pass a series of tests, both verbal and physical. Ordeal pits were created to accommodate the physical tests, which included exposing the person to extreme temperatures, potentially freezing or burning them, or to other threats that test their courage. Sounds like something that would happen in college hazing, right? The Roman Emperor Commodus, for his own sadistic sense of pleasure, forced people to undergo a severe version of Mithraic rites to kill them. Yet by the end of the 3rd century, these pits were floored over, revealing that this mystery became more accommodating as time went on. As mentioned, the cult of Mithras had 7 grades. The first was known as the Corex, which was the raven. I guess I'm giving away mysteries. Is that okay? You don't mind? All right. Which is the Corex, which was the raven in association with the planet Mercury. And his symbol was either the beaker of the caduceus, beaker or the caduceus. The second grade was called the nymphus, who was the bridesman, in association with the planet Venus, and his symbol could be the lamp, a veil, a diadem, a handbell, or a circlet. The third grade was called the Milas, who was the soldier, in association with Mars, and his symbol could be the helmet, lance, pouch, breastplate, drum, or belt. The fourth grade was called the Leo, the lion, in association with the planet Jupiter. And his symbol varied from the thunderbolt to the sistrum to the laurel leaf. An Egyptian papyrus preserves part of the catechumen for the Leo grade. And I'll tell you what they say. It says, he will say where he is there at Los, say night. And he will say where, say all things. And he will say, you are called. Say, because of the summary, having become he of the fiery, and he will say, did you receive, inherit? Say, in a pit. He will say, where is your, and there's a break. And then he says, he will say, will you girt the heavenly, and there's a break, death. And he will say, why having girded yourself, there's a break. And this is 4 tassels. Very sharp, there's a break in the, again. And he says, he will say, hot and cold. He will say, red linen. He will say, why? Red border, the linen, however, and then something being wrapped. And there's something that says the Savior, and he will say, who is the Father? Say, the one who begets everything. And he will say, how did you become a Leo? Say, by the something blank of the Father. Say, drink and food. And he will say something of the 7th, and it breaks off. So, which is, you get the idea. The 5th grade was called Persis, meaning the Persian, in association with the moon, and the symbols including the Phrygian cap, the sickle, a sling pouch, and a moon with stars. The 6th grade was called Heliodromos, meaning sun runner, in association with Sol, the sun, and was represented as a torch, robes, Helios, whip, and the image of the sun itself. Finally, the 7th grade was Pater, or father, in association with Saturn, with symbols including a shepherd's staff, mitre, garnet, patera, ruby, and robes dripping with decorations. That's a lot, but we don't know the deeper parts. At Dura Europos, each member's name was associated with a specific grade that appears to demonstrate that a devotee worked their way up the grades gradually to reach the highest levels, considered that of Heliodromos and Pater. After the first initiation into the community, the devotees received a binding handshake with both the Heliodromos and the Pater, making them now officially referred to as the Senduxoi, and with the Heliodromos acting like the soul or the sun. And of course, you have the Mithraic feast, was a major part of the mystery cult. Now, the cult of Mithras worship happened in a specific underground sacred place called the Mithraeum, having benches running along at least 2 of its sides to accommodate a special banquet, and have an altar depicting Mithras slaying the bull. The Mithraeum was intended to resemble a cave. It was even called a cave in the inscriptions. Here in this cave, vows were made, transformations realized, and rites celebrated. One Latin inscription states that one donor adorned his cave in order that the participants, united by joining hands, may joyously celebrate their vows for all time. So let's go to pictures. So one day I was in Rome and I decided to go to St. Clement's Church. This is a typical 12th century basilica. Let's go to the next image. These are my pictures. A nice monumental entryway. And let's go to the next picture. And it's beautiful inside. Well, below that is a 4th century basilica. But below that, let's go to the next image. This is my poor picture. I have a better picture of it. There is a late 2nd and early 3rd century Mithraic temple that I was about to see. I'll give you a clearer picture, although this is mine. We'll go to the next one. Oh, what's the next one? There it is. There is what's called a pronaos, which is the vestibule. So I had a chance to see this firsthand. This has a ceiling with geometrical and floral patterns. There are 2 square pilasters of Parian marble that support 3 arches over the entrance and where the Mithraic altar once stood. but also later on it was moved into the triclinium. So this is the altar, and you can see here it's moved into the triclinium. Triclinium, of course, is the banquet hall, and you can see the seats to the left, and you can see the seats to the right, and there were seats in back where the most important were located. And this was, of course, where the victory banquet of Apollo and Mithras was located. Let's go to the next image. There's, yeah, the grotto represents the universe. Of course, there were stars painted on the ceiling. In fact, specifically at St. Clement, the stars were in the stucco, along with 11 openings. The smaller ones represent the 7 constellations. The larger ones represented the 4 seasons. The altar, there were busts that represent the seasons, and 2 spirit genies, I should say, on the altar as well. You also have a Calter represented with the flame aloft, which connects to the declivity of the sun, as well as Catapox, which of course flame lowered torches. You have the sun god Helios on the left and Selene, goddess of the moon, on the right. Let's go to the next image. We do have this image of this man who was apparently one of the Mithraic worshippers there, sporting a nice beard. Next image. And of course, yeah, here's an image of Calter. Actually, this is Counterpox because the torch is down. That is located there. Let's go to the next image. Back to my terrible pictures. These are the initiation rooms that has 7 niches that represent the 7 stages that are here. Let's go to the next image. And you can see some others here. There's 3 rooms. There's a triclinium, the dining room, vestibule, and the room where the catchmen are located. So it's kind of cool to have a chance to go down below, but there's quite a few of these. All right, so let's go to the next image. Oh, more pictures of mine of underneath. Go to the next image. Okay, so we're gonna have to go quicker here, but I do want to, this is, of course, it could be a topic of an entirely different talk, but I'd be remiss not to mention Isis. So I will mention Isis here. So there was, of course, the cult of Isis. This is another ancient mystery cult. Now, Isis proclaimed, "I am nature, the universal mother, mistress of all the elements, primordial child of time, sovereign of all things spiritual, queen of the dead, queen of the ocean, queen also of the immortals, the single manifestation of all gods and goddesses that are. My nod governs the shining heights of heavens, the wholesome seas of breezes. Though I am worshipped in many aspects, known by countless names, the Egyptians who excel in ancient learning and worship call me by my true name, Queen Isis." This is what she proclaims in the work, according to Appius in his novel, The Golden Ass, which is written in the 2nd century. As all-encompassing as this proclamation may seem, the goddess Isis was perceived by the Egyptians, then Greeks, and finally the Romans in different ways over the march of centuries, as she constantly evolved to suit new religious and cultural movements. By the Hellenistic and into the Roman age, Isis, because of her reputation as a goddess of knowledge and understanding, became a prime candidate for mystery religions emerging at this time. The Greeks formulated their own distinct family line for Isis, making her the daughter of Hermes, the messenger god, but for aspects as related to this goddess, also the deity of cunning, of transitions and boundaries, and the inventor of grammar and music. Plutarch continues. He says, there is also a tradition that Osiris and Arurus were sprung from the sun, Isis from Hermes, and Typhon and Nephis from Kronos. For this reason, the kings considered the third of the intercalated days as inauspicious and transacted no business on that day. Um, According to Plutarch in the 1st century concerning initiation, the goddess collects and puts together and gives into the keeping of those that are initiated in the holy rites, since this consecration by a strict regimen and by abstinence from many kinds of food and from the lust of the flesh curtails licentiousness and the love of pleasure and induces the habit of patient submission. So it is very much an ascetic belief. Let's go into the next image. According concerning her mysteries, Plutarch states that Isis discloses the divine mysteries to those who truly and justly have the name of bearers of the sacred vessels and wearers of the sacred robes. These are they, he says, who within their own souls, as though within a casket, bear the sacred writings about the gods, clear of all superstition, and they cloak them with secrecy, thus giving uh, intimation, some dark and shadowy, some bright and clear, of their concepts about the gods, intimations of the same sort as are clearly evidenced in the wearing of the sacred garb. For this reason, too, the fact that the deceased votaries of Isis are decked with these garments is a sign that these sacred writings accompany them, and that they pass to the other world possessed of these and of naught else. And so there you have it. If actually he says it is a fact, Clea, he's writing Clea, the having a beard and wearing a coarse cloak does not make philosophers, nor does dressing in linen and shaving the hair make votaries of Isis. But the true votaries of Isis is he who, when he has legitimately received what is set forth in the ceremonies connected with these gods, uses reason in investigating and in studying the truth contained therein. So there you have it. Let's go to the next image. And so you have, of course, lots of images, beautiful images connected to the mysteries. Now, I will mention that that according to Appius in his Golden Ass, written in the 2nd century, it incorporates much understandings of these mystery beliefs. I wish I had more time to go through them, but it does open with an epiphany. And this epiphany of the goddess who does appear to Lucius, who's the main character in this novel. And so what happens is she proclaims, Queen of Heaven. Actually, he proclaims first. So he prays for an epiphany. I'm going to read this first. He prays, Queen of Heaven, whether you are known as beautiful Ceres, the primal harvest mother, who delighted at finding your daughter Persephone again, abolished our primitive woodland diet, showed us sweet nourishment, and now dwells at Eleusis, or heavenly Venus, who at the founding of the world joined the sexes by creating love, propagating the human race in endless generation, and worship now in the sea-girt sanctuary at Paphos, or Diana, Apollo's sister, you who relieve the pangs of countless childbirths with your soothing remedies, venerated now at Ephesus, or dread Persephone herself, she of the night cries, who triple-faced combats the assaults of spirits, shutting them from earth above, who wanders the many sacred groves, perpetuated by the host of rites, O light of women, illuminating every city, nourishing the glad seed with your misty radiance, setting that light whose power varies with the passage of the sun, and whether aspect, by whatever name, with whatever ceremony we should invoke you, have mercy on me in the depths of my distress. Grant good fortune, give me peace and rest after cruel tribulation. Let the toil and dangers I have endured suffice. Rid me of this foul four-footed form. Restore me to the sight of my own people. Make me the Lucius I once was, or if I may not live, if I have offended some deity who hounds me with inexorable savagery, grant me the gift of death. And so you have this great proclamation, right? So she does appear in response to him. So this Isis of the mysteries is described. Firstly, she has her long, thick hair in tapering ringlets was loosely spread over her divine neck and shoulders, and her head was crowned with a complex garland, it says, of interwoven flowers of every kind. At the center over her brow, a flat disc like a mirror, or rather a moon symbol, shone with brilliant light. Coiled vipers reared from the right and left of her coronet that was bristling with erect ears of corn. Her multicolored robe was of finest linen, gleaming here pure and white, here a saffron yellow, there a flaming rose red, with a woven border flowing with flowers and fruit. And what dazzled me most of all was her jet black cloak with its full sheen, wrapped, gleaming about her, slung from the left shoulder, knotted at the breast, and sweeping over her right hip. It hung in sweetly undulating complex folds down to a tasseled fringe. Along its border and over its surface fell a scatter of glittering stars round a full moon at the center, breathing fiery rays. And she bore a host of emblems. It's like, wow. So you can see how this image will permeate not only this ancient mystery of Isis, but permeate images of her even into the modern world, even into the current imagination. And she says, "Behold, Lucius, I am here, moved by your prayers. I, mother of all nature and mistress of the elements, firstborn of the aegis and greatest of powers divine, queen of the dead and queen of immortals, all gods and goddesses in a single form, who with a gesture commands heavenly glittery summit, the wholesome ocean breezes." And of course, I read much of this before. So she claims herself as this deity, this goddess that encompasses all other deities. There's almost a syncretism that is all coming together. Now, what happens is that she says that so this epiphany occurs, and it talks about the fact all everything we talked about mystery cults are here. It talks about the idea that and have faith in my power to oversee the execution of my orders for this very moment when I am here. So there's idea of faith. There's idea of epiphany. She also says, remember one thing clearly, though, and keep it locked deeply within your heart, that life that is left to you to that final sigh of your last breath is pledged to me. It is right that all your days be devoted to she whose grace returns you to the world of men. Under my wing, you will live in happiness and in honor. And when your span of life is complete and you descend to the shades, even there in the sphere beneath the earth, you will see me who am now before you, gleaming amidst the darkness of Aharon, queen of the Stygian depths, and dwelling yourself in the Elysian fields. You will endlessly adore me, and I will favor you. Know too that if by obedience, dutiful service, and perfect chastity you are worthy of my divine grace, I and I alone can extend your life beyond the limits set by fate. So, with this pledge, you get not only eternal life in joy and happiness in the Elysian fields, but in this current life, when your day is up, the wheel of fortune is saying that the number of days are over. She can extend them because she's in charge of fate. You can have a longer life. I can defy that idea. So this is a real conversion experience within the mystery cults, right? In fact, and then what's the result? Lucius is filled with utter amazement at this clear manifestation of the great goddess's presence. I splash myself with seawater, reviewing intently her series of potent commands, Soon the dark shades of night were dispelled, a gold sun arose, and at once a crowd of triumphant believers thronged the streets. Not only was I in my secret joy, but the whole world seemed to fill with such happiness that the creatures, the skies, the very houses themselves seemed to radiate joy from their shiny faces. For now, a serene and sunlit morning on the heels of yesterday's frost, with its warm spring, enticed the birds to sing in sweet harmony and charms with their happy greetings. The Queen of Stars, it goes on other seasons. Lucius is now overwhelmed by this delight, by this happiness. He, in a sense, is going through a reborn, transformative experience. I mean, you could see it, right? Or you could hear it, right? Well, but then of course he comes across a procession that's connected to Isis, and he says, but behind these laughter-loving crowd pleasers wander all over the place. The procession proper was ready itself to celebrate the goddess who saves. So here you have Isis is a savior goddess. At its head went women in gleaming white, garlanded with flowers of spring, rejoicing their very burdens, scattering blossoms along the path where the sacred gatherings would pass. Others had shining mirrors fastened to their backs to show their obedience to the goddess who would follow, or they bore ivory combs and feigned to shape and dress the golden goddess's hair, while others sprinkled the streets with pleasant balsam and fragrances. There followed a throng of men and women carrying every means of shedding light, such as torches, lamps, wax candles to honor the sources of the celestial stars. You have this idea of light, you have this idea of epiphany. He describes a mighty throng of men and women of every age and ranks. Now you have this universalism, initiates of the sacred mysteries. Here it is. Poured on behind their linen robes, shining radiantly, the women's hair in glossy coils under transparent veils, the men's head closely shaved and glistening, the earthly stars of the great rite, and each one shook a sistrum of bronze or silver or something gold, giving out a shrill tinkling sound. The foremost priests of the cult came next in white linen, drawn tight across their chests and hanging to their feet, carrying the distinctive emblems of the powerful gods. Wow. But they also had their secrets. In fact, he describes these too. In his footsteps, a priest with proud and measured steps carried a statue on his shoulders, a cow seated upright, the cow being a fruitful symbol of the divine mother of all. Another bore a basket containing secret implements, like we saw in the Eleusinian Mysteries, concealing objects of great sanctity. And it goes, so there's secrets that are here, right? So beyond all that, of course, there's a mention of what's called the navigatum. Let's go to the next image. There we go. So what happens is there, once the emblems, according to this primary source, of the gods have been properly disposed, the high priest consecrated a finely crafted ship decorated with marvelous Egyptian hieroglyphics. Taking a lighted torch, an egg, and some sulfur, he uttered solemn prayers with reverent lips and purified the ship thoroughly, dedicating it and naming it for the goddess. The shining sail of this happy vessel bore an inscription, its letters woven in gold, the text of a prayer for a prosperous sailing throughout the new season. The mast of smooth pine was raised now, tall and splendid, the flag at its tip conspicuous from afar. Gold leaf glittered from the stern, which was shaped like Isis's sacred goose, while the whole hull of highly polished citron wood gleamed pale. Then the crowd of priests and laity alike vied in loading the vessel with winnowing fans, spread with spices and poured libations of milk and grain over the waves. Once the ship had received a wealth of gifts and auspicious prayers, the mooring ropes were loosed and she was given to the waters, accompanied by a gentle breeze that rose in greeting. And when she was so far out to sea, we could no longer see her clearly. The priests took up their burdens again and set out joyfully for the shrine in the same fine, orderly procession as before. And it goes on, of course, it goes into various rituals. Let's see my face a little bit. There's a lot more details. I'm going to summarize a little bit though here. Thank you for showing that image here. Accordingly, he is now in the temple, but he says that Lucius says that she urged me again and again to become initiate to her rites for which I had long been destined. And so eventually he will go into her rites. But what's interesting here is obviously he has to go through a period of fasting and be very careful with that. But then he goes on. He says, moreover, day by day, my desires for holy orders intensified. And time and again, I entered the high priest to hasten my initiation into the mysteries of the sacred night. But he, being a grave man, remarked for his close observance of the strictest religious discipline, restrained my insistence gently and kindly, as parents will restrain their children's unripe urges, calming my natural eagerness with a comforting expectation of goods to come. He told me the proper day for a person's initiation is always marked by a sign from the goddess, that the officiating priest was likewise indicated by her, and even the cost of the ceremony be defrayed. He advised me to suffer the delay with reverence and patience, since over-eagerness and disobedience were faults to be guarded against. So you have to wait. You have to wait for the time. So the goddess decides the time when this happens. The time does eventually happen. And so what is the mystery? Well, Lucius, through Appius, gives this mystery, but cannot fully tell. And will say as follows. It says, and now, diligent reader, you are no doubt keen to know what was next and what was done. I tell you, if to tell you were allowed. If you are allowed to hear, then you might know. But ears and tongues would sin equally, the latter for its profane indiscretion, the former for its unbridled curiosity. Oh, I shall speak, since your desires to bear may be a matter of deep religious longing, and I would not torment you with further anguish, but I shall speak only of what can be revealed to the minds of the uninitiated, without need for subsequent atonement. Things which, though you have heard them, you may well not understand. So now he's going to give you a little of what happened. He said, so listen, and behold what is true. I reached the very gates of death and the treading of Persephone's threshold, yet passed through all the elements and returned. I have seen the sun at midnight shining brightly, and I have entered the presence of the gods below and the presence of the gods above, and I have paid due reverence for them. And so that's what happened. It's very shaded. You don't fully understand what's going on, but there you have it. Now let's go to the next image. Yes, this is the cult of Artemis Ephesia. Obviously, it had mysteries too. For both literary sources and inscriptions refer to such mysteria being enacted. But as the historian Oster states, references to them are scant. This is not to be unexpected, for ancient mysteries, after all, were not to be expressed or spoken about because of the perceived sacredness. According to an inscription dating from the 3rd century CE, the mysteries of Artemis Ephesia were actually recognized by King Lysimachus, 306 to 281 BCE, in the 3rd century, and were permitted to lapse at some point, most likely the 1st century CE, because the evidence from inscriptions revealed a continuity up to that period. But during the reign of the Emperor Commodus, were renewed through a generous donation. This very same inscription mentions a sacred meal in connection to these mysteries. Go to the next image. Strabo mentions that a special, this is another image of Artemis Ephesia. This is the great Artemis. He is known as the beautiful Artemis. Let's go to the next image. Strabo mentions that a special college of Curites held symposiums and conducted certain mystic sacrifices in the Ortega Gardens. One 1st century CE Thanksgiving inscription from Vipsania Olympia and Vipsania Polis states that the Mysteria and the sacrifices have been fulfilled in a delightful manner. Without question, unquote. Without question, specific sacrifices were linked to the mysteries of Artemis Ephesia. Dieter Knibb and Guy Rogers have identified the curities on the various lists inscribed on these very Doric columns that you're seeing here, directly in front of the Prytaneum, as related to both the civic religion and the mysteries of Artemis Ephesia. And so as a result, we can decipher the majority of the cult attendants by their listed functions, even gaining insights on how the sacrifices were conducted, including how the meat was cut and distributed. The Curities inspected sacrificial victims, heralded the sacred at the mysteries, were in charge of burning incense while a cultic dance was performed, played the flute as the libations were poured, and most importantly, initiated people literally into the mysteries. Let's go to the next image. You can see the flute being played here. Both Knibb and Rogers believe the cult attendant, called the Epithematru, who combined the incense burning with some form of dance, was most likely confined to the performance of the mysteries of Ortygia and the processions down to that location. Meanwhile, the Hierophant was a kind of ritual master of ceremonies. In fact, Rogers asserts the Curities' main task had been continued to be the celebration of the mystery, specifically the reenactment of the birth of Artemis. Because of the reference to mystic sacrifices in relation to the Ortygia Gardens and the fact that we know a dramatic recreation of the birth of Artemis and Apollo by Leto was celebrated there, complete with Curities stationed on the hills above the site to ward away Hera, along with evidence of the Curities specifically associated with these mysteries in the inscriptions. The majority of Ephesian scholars, including Rogers, Knibb, and myself, agreed that the Mysteria included this annual event, with only the specifics unknown. Lillian Portafax deducts two parts of these celebrations at Ortygia related to the mysteries. Let's go to the next image. This is a picture of me standing at the remains of a temple near Ortygia. And she says as follows. She said the first parts of these celebrations of Ortygia. The first focuses on the birth of the heavenly twins, seems to have consisted of a drama showing the distress of the pregnant Leto, searching for an appropriate place to give birth to Zeus's children and finding refuge at Ortygia, here being under the protection of the Curities from the jealousy of Hera, and she was safe to bear her children. The second part of the celebration consisted of two festive meals, one of which seems to be an ordinary banquet arranged by the Ephesian youths. The other meal referred to the initiates and had a mysterious character. It was organized by the Curities, who on this occasion assumed the role of a mystical brotherhood, acting in a cult drama, as well as being a municipal body representing the Prytanean. Excuse me. We must conclude, though, that while many mysteries were kept secret, others were not really mysteries in a secret sense, but just kept more obscure because they were open to a larger amount of participants. And chances are most Ephesians, regardless of whether they participated in the mysteries or not, had some generalized idea of their account, as it is true of so many other ancient mystery cults, for instance, the Eleusinian mysteries. I do want to show you an image of the Ortygia Gardens. So let's go to the next image. So this is the image of the Ortygia Gardens, where they are located today. And let's go to the next image. And there's me after the excavation of the Ortygia Gardens. Okay, you can put down that image. Get the idea? All right. One of the most celebrated individuals referred to within the context of the mysteries of Artemis of the Ephesians is Heraclitus, often given the rather ominous title of the Obscure. According to local legend, as reported by Tatian in the 2nd century, Heraclitus being self-taught and arrogant, said, "I have explored myself," and hid his poem in the temple of Artemis in order that it may be published later on as a mystery. Tatian adds that those who take interest in such things say that Euripides, the tragic poet, came and read it, and gradually learning it by heart, carefully handed down to posterity this darkness. The question arises whether this act by Heraclitus is to be taken literally, was intended to be published as an actual mystery in a cult sense, or was merely a literary mystery. And if the cult, in the cult sense, if the fact that they were deposited in the temple of Artemis makes them mysteries of the cult of Artemis, did the Curetes hand down these obscure words of Heraclitus as part of the mysteries of Artemis Ephesia to the new initiates? We don't know. Apparently, Heraclitus also spent much of his time about the temple of Artemis and was frequently seen playing dice games with the local children in the vicinity in his later years. And Astragalus, one usually basically a set of magical dice, was actually discovered there. G.H. Horsley demonstrate that the mysteries exclusive to Artemis Ephesia were performed at least as far away as Cremena in Pisidia, as specifically mentioned in an inscription currently housed in the Archaeological Museum at Bordeaux and dating between 150 to 210 CE. Here, a priestess claims to have found these mysteria, meaning they may have been lost or at least allowed to lapse before that point. Just how they were found is a valid question, since mysteries were not typically written down, but perhaps this case was an exception. As for deciphering the nature of the mysteries of Artemis Ephesia, Lilium Portifex and others agree that the actual cult image of the goddess herself played a central role with the exotic Artemis achieving prominence at the very same time the mysteries were inaugurated, leaving the iconography itself as possible guides to the Mysteria. See, beforehand, it was a wooden image of Artemis of the Ephesians, and now all of a sudden it has protuberances. It has a lot of things going on in the way of imagery, as we saw in those earlier pictures. And so this is also the exact same time as these mysteries are said to be surrounding Artemis of the Ephesians. So there's a connection there with the cult statue. The image of Artemis Ephesia in relation to the zodiac was quite prevalent in her iconography, with this connection to astrology and thereby the cosmos, making her a goddess related to destiny as well as fate. The Ephesians already believed that the appealing to Artemis Ephesia could potentially change one's fate in an immediate sense, but as queen of heaven, the Ephesian goddess, like Isis, entered into a larger arena of fate in a universal sense, becoming a savior figure. The idea of salvation in both an immediate and ultimate sense in relation to life and death um, is one central aspect of the mystery cults, as we had discovered, meaning it is likely the mysteries of Artemis Ephesia included such associations, especially that of being reborn, with the idea of birth so central to her characteristics, whether it be the reenacting of her birth in the gardens with Apollo, being called upon by mothers as they gave birth, or as bestowing the regenerative powers within nature. Evidence that Artemis Ephesia was understood as a goddess of salvation is not difficult to find, for she is often connected to this attribute in various inscriptions. As we mentioned earlier, at Ortygia, where the mysteries were performed, Lysimachus erected sometime around 294 BCE both the temple and the cult statue of what is known as the Savior Artemis. That's what it is. She's called a savior. The inscription from 211 demonstrates that the Prytanis performed the mysteries and sacrifices for the purpose of, quote, our common salvation, unquote. Hence, the mysteries of Artemis Ephesia were tied directly to the idea of salvation and were performed with that intention in mind. As a result, many consider Artemis of the Ephesians herself as a goddess of salvation. In fact, she was even referred to as Mistress Salvation, Soteria. The discussion of Artemis Ephesia as goddess of life and death in the cosmological sense leads us back to the cult image of Artemis Ephesia, where symbols of both life and death appear prominently upon her iconography. Portafix notes that life is shown by the flowered headband of the goddess, the wreath of flowers around her neck, and the rosettes decorating the lower part of the statue, while death, represented by demons in the shape of lions and winged beasts of various kinds, including winged bulls, are also represented. So you got life as well as death. But there's more. The bees upon Artemis Ephesia were naturally viewed in antiquity as symbols for the soul. Let's go to the last image. But not all souls were considered to be bees. The Neoplatonist philosopher, all souls, however, proceeding into generation, are not simply called bees, but those who live justly and who perform such things are acceptable to the gods, will return whence they came. For this insect loves to return in the place whence it came, and eminently just and sober, unquote. This is, so the Ephesians, of course, not only the bees are on the statue of Artemis of the Ephesians, but you can see this was even on their coinage. Okay, and the last image. Furthermore, Periphery, quoting Sophocles, states that the swarm of the dead hums and rises upward. Hilda Ransom believes that Virgil may have been thinking of the souls of the dead as bees when he describes Aeneas besides the waters of Lethe, and how he saw the unnumbered hosts of spirits who are drinking the waters, and compared them to the bees swarming in the meadows beneath a cloudless summer sun, so that the air was filled with its hum. Of course, the idea of reincarnation as evidence in Virgil and Periphery, and in so many others, may even undergird the myth of Glaucus, telling the story of a boy who died, who was buried in a honey jar and was restored to life with the help of Politis. While Portafix ascribes to Satelli's theory that the protuberances were once understood as the scrota of bulls offered to the divinity, making the endowing of the statue of the great fertility goddess with male reproductive powers a symbolic act. The evidence of bulls in other contexts related to the cult of Artemis Ephesia, whether through iconography in connection with the zodiac sign of Taurus, or the fact that many of her sacrifices involve bulls, is not doubted. The pairing of bees with bulls has an important significance in the Mediterranean world, for it was part of the commonly held belief that bees did not propagate themselves in a natural way, but were spontaneously reproduced from the carcasses of a bullocks. Thus, the bull representing death, while the bee represented new life. Antigonus of Kerystos in the 2nd century BCE believed that in Egypt, if you bury the ox in certain places, the result is that the bees fly out, for the ox purifies and is resolved into bees, unquote. The same belief related to bees and bulls is mentioned by Varro, Virgil, Ovid, and Pliny. The idea of bulls and bees in relation to one another was even spiritualized by Porphyry in relation to reincarnation, declaring that, quote, the moon, Artemis, too, whose province it was to bring to birth, they call Melissae, because the moon, being a bull, and its ascension a bull, bees are begotten of bulls, and souls that pass to the earth are bull begotten, unquote. Again, the reference to the zodiac and a reference in particular to the sign of Taurus, which ascended in mid-April, has special significance to Artemis Ephesia, being one of 3 most prominent signs on her cult figure. although we are uncertain exactly what festivities occurred during the month called Dices, which was a month prior to Pananios the Thargelian, where the Ephesians addressed both the mysteries at Ortygia and the feast of Artemis Deities. Summarizing, Portifex believes that during the mysteries, initiates the goddess in her role as midwife will be thought to assist the souls of the initiates, represented as bees, at their birth into this new life, a life generated through the bowls, and so bring them into a new blessed existence in Hades, where the reborn souls will be transformed from bees into winged maidens, thus triumphantly identifying with the goddess. Well, the mysteries of Artemis Ephesia thrived throughout the early Roman period, but by the end of the 2nd century, there's evidence that cult officials overseeing them were involved in mysteries of other gods and goddesses as well, as most notably Demeter, Kore, and Hestia. And so there is a decline there. But again, another example of an ancient mystery cult. I think we have a conclusion. And so mystery cults are a form of personal religion. They are a form of religion where it's a sense of one can gain a new life in the hereafter. People feared death. They wanted more than just being here, living in this existence, this very short existence. And so the hope was that they could go to a place where they could live eternally. It's interesting that the mystery cults have all the major features that we will later on see within Christianity. I want to make it very clear the mystery cults predate Christianity. Initially, of course, goes back to the 600s BCE, but more immediately during the time of Alexander the Great. This is the 300s. And so by the time the mysteries Artemis Ephesia, as mentioned, were already being popularized during the 200s BCE. So this is well before the advent of Christianity. And yet these are belief systems that had what? They had initiations. These initiations included, in many cases, a form of baptism. They included a form of ritual meal in commemoration to the deity, the saving deity. And the saving deity was what? Well, was one in some cases. You have this deity is one that dies and comes back to life again, as we see with Dionysus. We see this a little bit with Orestes. Obviously, you have this idea within the Mithric aspect. So you have these concepts there. Okay, so you have this. These mystery cults did believe in a figure that had saving powers, and that through personal belief, if you personally believe in this particular god or goddess, you, through your faith, will be saved by this deity, not only in this life, but in the hereafter, even in a heaven-like realm. You just had to go through various acts, various kinds of ritual actions, but you also have to proclaim your faith. And with that faith, you'll have this epiphany because this religion is all your own. It's personal. And yet still there is a public version form of that through, of course, the votives, the votaries, through, so it's still part of society. It does display the human need for immortality, that we wish to live on. And those are the mysteries. I may not have revealed the deepest parts of these mysteries because so many are a secret. At the same time, at the very center is a story that was well told, it was performed, it was believed as true, and the belief in that story also gave a sense of soteria, gave a sense of salvation. And so you cannot understand the context of early Christianity without understanding the context of mystery religions. And it's interesting because many early Christian writers recognize that fact, but it's something that most people don't know today. And that's an important idea too. But it shows or displays who we are as humans and what our basic needs and wants and desires are. Thank you so much and have a great night.